It's yeah. I got the chat loaded. Warming up, turning on the turbo encabulator. The muffler bearing. No, what was it? Yeah, there we go. Oh, that's cool. So Streamlabs will tell you. Mics are hot. Mics are hot. We might as well go. Mics are hot. We're here. We're here. You probably heard us.
Hi. Hi, Paul.
Hello. Oh my goodness. Look, your thing is messed up. Your thing is messed up. Why? Why?
What did I do wrong?
Why? Look at this. We're gonna live edit. This is how good I'm getting at this stuff. Well, I mean, I'm not that good because it keeps messing up. But do you feel that? Is it like, what if I do this?
No, don't.
Okay.
I'm getting dizzy.
Hey, chat. How's it going? See some always friendly and familiar names in there. Sorry. I'm trying to like crop with terrible controls and be entertaining all at the same time. How's everybody doing? Todd
Hi,
Little's
everybody.
here. Cool. Yeah, you're just going to be a little bit off, and that's okay because we're not going to stay on the screen very long.
Because we have a special guest.
We have another special guest, and we're going to switch over. Oh, that was painless, except for Spencer's.
Hey, everyone.
Oh, man. Adam, I'm so sorry.
Oh, that reminded me of like a Facebook chat head coming in.
Yeah.
Like, during the Android days.
Yeah, I forgot about those. We thought that was so like innovative, round avatars that hovered around the corner of your thing. Adam, man, Spencer, I made you like you're only 4 feet tall. I'm trying.
What's going on?
I'm trying. The good news is once I get this one, I can copy it. Jeez, my gosh, we are professionals here. Adam, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I will kick things off and then I'll focus on fixing up stuff if I need to.
No, you're totally good. I was just about to ask you if you could make his avatar circle.
Oh, you know what? The old software we're using made that really easy, and for surprisingly, OBS does not. But I'm pretty sure there's like a filter. Actually, well, no. See, I'm gonna go off on a little thing and try.
Yeah, let's not go there.
Let's not live edit my OBS.
You gotta add like a 1 pixel white border with like a drop shadow.
Yeah,
like,
actually, that might be these are things. This is our new layout. For those that weren't here last week, we've got this new layout. But anyway, we're here to talk to Adam. Adam Debreczeni. Debreczeni? Do you say it fast?
I say it really, really fast because even I don't know how to pronounce it right.
So you're really Adam Debreczeni.
Yeah, so it's like Adam Debreczeni. Well, in school, they would always just say Adam D because the teachers, especially in Florida, would just kind of just give up after like D. They're like Adam D. Cool, all right.
You know who Adam D is. You know who we're talking about. So, yeah, tell us about yourself. However you want to introduce yourself. We have lots of stuff to talk about with your background. But yeah, kick it off.
Oh man, that's really daunting. You know, it's funny because like, when we were doing our first VC, fundraise, like I'm sure Paul, you've been through that. You end up rehearsing this like 90-second spiel of who you are, and it's like geared just for that firm. Whereas I feel like even if you woke me up at 4 a.m, I could give that 90-second spiel.
Right.
Of like, my father was a software engineer. I've always been interested in spatial computing. You know.
Yeah.
I'm sure like you had to go through that as well. I'm kind of a. Yeah, the elevator pitch for sure.
Of yourself.
Of myself. Well, which is why it's funny with fundraising, because like when you get a yes, it's like the best thing in the world, especially pre-seed, because you're kind of fundraising on the team and not really on the idea. Yeah. And then when you get a no, it's like so soul crushing.
You're just judging us, not our idea.
Totally. It's so funny because everyone gives you that advice of like, oh, it's like pre-seed is always just about the team. So like, it's like they know you're gonna pivot, and then when you get a no, you're like, oh crap! So they said no to me,
Right.
That's right. Not your idea. You
not my
personally.
idea, right?
Right.
So yeah, I guess my very quick 90-second spiel is I'm like a AR software engineer designer as well. Been working on a lot of startups. I guess this is my third startup now, which is crazy. I've worked in a mixture of kind of like big companies, small companies. Just like I love that intersection of design and engineering, and especially like this kind of new frontier of AR VR.
And I feel you like on like the pitching part of it. One of my co-founders who'd been through the rodeo a few times was like, look, by the end of this, we're all going to hear each other say the same thing. You have to act interested no matter what. Like, don't, like, if you know Adam's about to start his like 5-minute thing, that his monologue, don't start checking your phone. Act like this is the first time you've heard it. Like, because like it does get that way. You just start rattling stuff off. And I'm a rambler. I like to give people tons of context because I want people to I try to get the playing field set. And I never know how far to go back. And people are so polite because like if I'm like, well, I was born and raised in South Carolina, and they're like, oh God, are we starting that far back? So yeah, it is interesting. So yeah, but it's always good to hear it in your own words. Like, so what would you say was your first kind of AR VR exposure? Like what started you on this path?
Let's go back.
So when you were born,
where were you conceived?
Well, I can take this 90-second spiel and make it a 90-minute spiel. This could be like one of those Netflix documentaries where it's like, man, that first episode is awesome, but this is 12 hours of content. I don't know how much I'm stoked about this.
Strangely, you have one answer for both those questions.
That's right.
No, you can answer Paul's question. Yeah.
No. I'm gonna go all the way back. I was born in Hungary, and it's funny enough. I moved over to Florida when I was 6, so kind of close to where I think you guys were working for a little bit. But my first, I guess, VR exposure was at Google. So at that time, I was working on material design, which is like Google's design system and framework. And it was funny because a lot of our marketing videos were like talking about this design system having 3 dimensions. It's like there was like a lighting aspect of it where like every drop shadow was lit. Every drop shadow was a result from like one lighting source that essentially like influenced the entire UI. And there's like this funny, you can find it on YouTube somewhere, but there's this really funny marketing video we did where it's like the material design team and they're like talking about this like light studio they built. They're like, there's so much intention behind like we like set up this entire light studio.
Was this during the whole like push for skeuomorphism, where like everything was made out of brick or stone or like that physical object bump maps and stuff like that?
It was actually a reaction against skeuomorphism because at that time iOS was so full of textures like leather and brick and the stuff that you mentioned. And material design was meant to like pare that stuff down. A lot of that was because it was really hard to scale skeuomorphic designs on Android because you had like a billion screen sizes and it was really difficult to like create 9 patches for like leather and wood and all this stuff. But the funny story was, they built this light studio to like study how light kind of hits paper and actually creates its own drop shadows based on like paper being in different elevations. And then they took photography of those drop shadows. And then they're like, then we made it into this 3D system. But really what ended up happening was they looked at the reference photos and went to Photoshop and used 1 pixel offset, 2 pixel blur with blur. Black, I think 66% opacity. And they're like, we did it. We like validated the system. Nailed it. So I always thought that was super funny. Like,
there's like $200,000 worth of research for someone to put like a drop shadow on it with the button.
Yeah, right? like that's like any beginning person doing design when you first discover that like oh, I can copy an element, take all the color out of it, darken it, and then blur it, and I instantly have this like crafted, like the drop shadow abuse of the early 2000s. Like it was exactly that process. Take a black dot, blur it, and then like pull the alpha out of it a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, it was super funny, but so we had this kind of dimensionality kind of built into the system, but in actuality, it wasn't three-dimensional at all. Like all of those original kind of design files were actually conceived either in Illustrator by the designers or in After Effects by like the motion designers. So these engineers would get these files and they would be like, you're describing something to me that's very interactive with like a timing curve.
Yeah.
And then when kind of VR came out, Google was super interested in that stuff super early in the day. And I guess my first project was like bringing material into three-dimensional space. And we quickly realized that like a lot of our design assumptions were just completely wrong.
Yeah.
Like even basic stuff like font sizes and, there's no concept of, one light source hitting elements perfectly and casting a perfect drop shadow because like you have nothing to cast shadows onto.
I have a question for you. How many game designers did you have on your team? People who came from the games industry.
Ooh. That team, I don't know a specific head count, but that team was like pretty much a 50-50 split between people that knew Unity super well. So those were traditional game designers, and then people who were like traditional software engineers.
Right. The reason I ask is because that whole concept of the pixel perfect shadow and the pixel perfect font and all that stuff, it just goes completely away when you turn it into a texture and start moving the camera around. It's no longer available to you.
Yeah. I mean, the funniest thing was the designers on that team. It was like a very funny way to solve that problem, where designers obviously didn't know how to work in Unity and didn't know how to even prototype in it. So they built a plugin that took a sketch artboard and broadcasted it onto a Unity surface.
Yep.
Right.
That was like two-dimensional.
Yep.
So like all of those UIs were just so like felt so bad in VR that there needed to be like a massive education process of like teaching the engineers really how to design concepts and teaching the designers how to communicate with engineers. And it was like a really broken process. Like I'm sure like you all had a similar challenge at Magic Leap as well, right? It's like how do you equip designers to like
you equip them with a Unity developer was the answer. Like it was
and that's what Torch was born out of, was that frustration.
Yeah, I mean so Magic Leap we had I would say the interaction design team, which kind of was the visual design as well, and they were all like your traditional credential design, like it came from RISD and like all these different prestigious design schools. And then a few came from like the CMU ETC program or like some of the more like multidisciplinary things, but they were generally completely arm's length from being able to iterate in 3D. And so that's really what we had Brian Schwab on a past episode. He started a team called Interaction Lab, and Interaction Lab was that iteration for the designers. And so, yeah, we saw that as a problem, and especially with a company that was dedicated to 3D computing already having this problem. And then when back in the day, when we were first kind of validating the idea for Torch, we met with the Facebook VR team back when it was a team. They were essentially a product team dedicated to like the different various Facebook VR products, and they had the same thing. And they were basically spending, for every one full-time designer was a full-time developer and even that is like, it as it gets in the way of iterating efficiently, being able to, now you've got the added problem of communicating what's in your mind to a developer, having them interpret that however they see fit. Then they finally implement it. Then you see it, and then you wind up standing over their shoulder and driving them crazy. And then if you add custom hardware to the mix, and now you've got to make a build and test it on the device, like it has not gotten much better, but unfortunately, it's not a big enough market of people that have experienced that pain to like fully dedicate a startup around it yet. But it certainly was the inspiration.
You know, I think it's an interesting thread you touched on there, which is when you build a tool, it's not only a way for you to communicate your intent, but it's a way to like conceive different ideas and like be part of that feedback process of how you work.
Yep.
And I think that's what was kind of discouraging during that Google stint. And I feel like probably is quite similar to the experience you had with that Facebook team, where the designers are constrained with the toolbox they can think in, and then they communicate that intent to an engineer, and the engineer builds it. And then there's always going to be a mismatch of like,
I think a perfect example of that was, I forgot which very high-end design team we hired at Magic Leap to do UI for us before we really had our own internal UI team like dialed in.
It was Artifact out of Seattle.
Artifact, right? And they came back with these incredible designs. But you know, props to them for like coming back after this event and really understanding what we were saying. But everything from the first design brief that they, you know, like they sent us this design brief is like really cool, and everything had an upper left corner or a sidebar, and it was all like screen based, and they weren't quite grokking it yet. You know that there's no upper. No, it's all just spatial. It's all around you. You have to stop thinking about corners, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we also had, we've talked about this before, I think, on the show. Like, the other part of it is, too, is like, so the naive response to that problem is, well, we're going to give you no constraints. So, like, we're designing... But like we're going to create the hardware and the operating system around what you want to design, which is a very naive, like, I don't understand how this process works, because a design, it's tough enough to speculate a design when you don't know the constraints, but it's even harder when you tell them there are no constraints. And so then you really don't have anything to editorialize around. And so that was the first big mistake Magic Leap made, was they tried to hire like the creative and the designer side first, and then and then said, we're going to build a system and hardware and software to support your creative, you know, like dream up the blue sky and we'll try to implement the system to support it. And that just, you would think that would work naively again, but like you really, the first thing you're going to ask is, well, what's possible? What can I do? What can't I do? Like, what is optimal? Like, what is good and bad? And that way I can calibrate to it.
You know, that really saved our butt quite a bit with the material design stuff, in that we already had a huge amount of distribution with Android devices. Because I remember we would show early versions of the system to like partners that, you know, built Android apps like Uber and Twitter and all that stuff. And they would give feedback being like, hey, this is a really cool system, but this is like, if you're giving us 7 primary colors, none of those are our colors. And we don't want to look like a Google product.
Yep.
So you need to give us some amount of flexibility that's like in your spec, that where we feel native to the platform, but we don't feel like your company, and that our brand still comes through. And that was a super hard challenge.
You really had a 7-color palette, and it was the Google colors.
It might have been even smaller. It might have been like 5 or 6, like, and they were like hard coded values. They were like yellow, green.
Yeah,
blue.
It's the yellow. I was gonna say it's that special light blue, the orange, the red, and the green.
Yeah,
the yellow.
Yeah, but I think you brought up an interesting point there, Paul, which is, especially when you're kind of working in a new medium, you know, like AR, and especially when you're building your own hardware like Magic Leap, you don't really know how people are actually going to use it.
Right.
So it's really difficult to like user test, right? Because like you don't have actual customers using your stuff. So you end up like creating hypotheses and then trying to solve those problems. They're all hypothetical.
Yep.
So it's like, how do you even know what constraints to put on your team and on yourself? It's a really, really hard problem.
Yeah, and and that's still a problem. With Torch. Like I was just telling, I was catching up with a former interaction designer from Magic Leap yesterday, and we were talking about all kinds of stuff. And he's going to start a new company that's going to be mobile AR based, and he's kind of coming from.
Who is it?
I don't want to say. I'll tell you later.
Oh, okay.
But he
Right.
he like he's like coming out of this world of headsets and being completely focused on that and building a product for this new form factor, and just kind of we're just obviously trading a lot of notes. And I was like, the problems are different. You've got a lot of expectation because this is being delivered on a phone, but you're introducing so many concepts, so much UX to someone, and you've got to be really careful because you have so much existing knowledge and bias towards how this stuff works. And it's really eye-opening to see this stuff used cold by a user. And for Torch in particular, we took big speculative gambles on UX. And I mean, we did early iteration where we did user testing, and we saw some fundamental flaws in how we were doing things. And so thankfully we caught those early and kind of fixed those as early as possible. But at a certain point, especially at a seed stage startup, we had to just commit. And then we rolled out this first product. And, once you start watching the metrics and start trying to figure out where are we having drop off points or all the things you do with the product, then we did deeper usability testing. But then the problem is, because it's so hard to do usability testing on this stuff because the users really aren't educated. They're not pre-educated. They don't have expectations. You're handing them, I used to say, you're handing them a brand new musical instrument that you've invented that they've never seen before, and you're asking them to play a song, and watching them try to figure it out. And it took us, I don't know if Tara's here. Tara was our design director. She was just a champ with all this stuff. And it took us about a year to get the feedback and a updated or refactored design that addressed that feedback, but also folded in new features. Then that was our Torch 4 release, was this big redesign. And that was based on months earlier usability studies. So my advice to him and my advice to anyone that's interested in this type of conversation is make it a part of your process to do true usability studies, hand it to people cold. I do, and this is actually super relevant when we do get to Primer, which is your current thing. You do some things really well in there, and I would go so far as to say it's probably a shining example of how mobile AR UX should be. But before we get to there, so you were at Google working on material, trying to figure out how to get material, which was an anti-skeuomorphic response to the stitched leather-bound screens of iOS, and trying to optimize for screens in mobile phones. Because really the skeuomorphism of iOS was kind of carried over from Mac OS, right? Mac had kind of really gone skeuomorphic with the bookshelf and all that stuff.
The bubbly,
the
stuff,
liquid, the aqua?
It was called Aqua.
Yeah, the aqua UX.
Aqua. Right.
So material was explicitly this vector friendly, multi-resolution friendly, but designed for a touch screen type of thing, and you're trying to get it into to work in VR. What happened after that? What was your transition from that?
Yeah. First of all, really appreciate the words on Primer. So I'm gonna bask in that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We'll get you some. We'll try to get you some sound bites today.
Make sure you like and subscribe.
Thank you.
To this channel.
Oh, the reciprocation. I love it.
Nice. Well done.
Yeah. So we, that challenge was obviously, pretty difficult, as I mentioned before. And when I ended up leaving Google, and the project that I really wanted to work on at that time was kind of solving that problem of like creating that bridge. It's funny, it's like very similar to what you all worked on with Torch,
Yep.
but it's really difficult now to imagine a time before mobile AR.
Right.
But like even at Google at that time, we thought AR was like really, really far away. I know Google had like Project Tango and stuff in the labs, but like no one really thought it was going to be a consumer ready experience as quick as it was with ARKit. I'm actually really curious, like from you all, because I know you both of you were quite deep in Magic Leap. Like, what was the reaction to the release of ARKit? Like, did you know like mobile AR was coming, or did it kind of catch you guys by surprise?
Well, we were kind of using mobile AR already before we joined Magic Leap, so we knew it
Yeah.
was
We knew it was a
on its way
thing.
for sure.
Yeah, we had actually done a couple projects. Spencer and I, before we joined the Magic
Yeah.
Leap, we'd done a couple of projects. Actually, we had a past guest, Bob Berkebile. If you guys are interested in a lot of that backstory, he's kind of that's how we got to know Bob. Was he was doing a lot of really cool stuff in 2012 on mobile AR. Um, we had known it was possible already, and then when I started driving the SDK and the creation workflow for Magic Leap, we actually had a little bit of a requirement in there where you could iterate on these ideas without requiring the headset, because we knew that the headset was going to be a long time coming and difficult to acquire and all this stuff. So there was actually a version of the Magic Leap SDK that ran on top of Tango, and we had a
Oh, really?
yeah,
Wow.
we had a few people use it, where we said, you come to Florida to like really test on the optics and on the device, but when you go back to your office and you want to iterate, you can use the same exact project but just deploy to a Tango tablet, and you
Hmm.
get the 6 DOF thing. The problem was the Tango tablet was not very good. Like the Tango tablet was fine for like the premiere demo they used for it, which was like kind of uh mapping a space basically. But like when you really wanted to use it
Yeah.
like how we would use ARKit today, the device, the battery died like in 40 minutes, and like it wasn't very performant. And so a lot of people, it just wasn't, we thought it was going to continue to improve. So when they restructured ATAP and the Tango side and all that stuff, we just kind of abandoned all that. And then ARKit came out after I had left Magic Leap, but we were starting Torch. And Torch, we were running on top of A-Frame and doing a lot of VR stuff. And then when ARKit came out, we very quickly were able to like show a demo of something built in VR showing an AR. So we knew that, we thought that was a huge validation, and like to have it at an OS level supported, we knew that's the most performant way. And we just thought it was a huge thing. And then for Google to quickly follow suit with AR Core, and like there was a little period of time that first year, like 2017 to 2018, there was a little bit of one-upsmanship going on with AR Core and AR Kit capabilities, still happening to some degree, but it felt like, oh wow, this is escalating quickly. So that's why
And we all win.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
And so that was the idea with Torch, was we were timing like, okay, surely other people see this momentum building. And so like we were trying to time it around the 2018, 2019 time frame. So it did appear quickly, but it hasn't really you don't see a lot of the functionality available outside of the social use case. And my personal opinion on it is that it's just too difficult to work with a lot of this stuff. And I think we did the same thing that you did, which is we focused on just iOS to start, and that gives you some latitude to work on both cutting edge stuff but also stabilize. But cross-platform, consumer-grade mobile AR is still not easy to do for most people.
Yeah, the reason I ask is, I mean, I know like internally at Google, like the AR stuff seemed really, really far away. And I mean, I was no longer Google when ARKit came out, but I mean, it's really surprised me, right? It's like you have OS level support for this framework that does things, fairly well, like kind of at the level of A-Frame and Vuforia and that kind of stuff. But that it just brought you instant distribution.
Yeah.
So it totally changed the game, right? Where now bigger companies and bigger brands were now aware of this kind of niche in computing, and it made all this stuff, you could build a company, you could build an app and immediately distribute through like the biggest app store in the world.
Yep.
And I know at that time, like the culture or the excitement was really like, this thing is going to like explode and like really be like a whole new platform for Apple, a whole new platform for Google. And then I think it shipped and people were like, oh, okay, you can put something on like a horizontal plane and interact with it, and then that's kind of it. It's like, what do you go? Like, what do you do with that?
Well, everybody wants Tony Stark's basement. They assume that at any moment now I can put a 500-foot robot behind that tree line over there and have the trees occlude the robot, because that's what happens in the movies. And even techie dorks like us are kind of expecting that sometimes. When stuff comes out, you're like, oh my God. And then,
but the truth is that, the mainstream level of expectation, both consumer and I would say enterprise as well, is very, very simple. Like it's the types of things people want to do that could show value for whatever they're trying to do as a consumer or an enterprise. The requirement, their requirements are fairly simple and
you're
rudimentary.
Right. I agree.
The technical challenges to meet those requirements are deceptively difficult and complex. But we're always trying to think about like how, we know all the things that are possible, and combining all these different input modalities and like eye tracking and hand gestures and like environmental reconstruction, classification of the real, like all combining all these things to do these really cool things. But really like, most people that are even thinking about this stuff right now are like, I want to put a poster on the wall, or I want to put a rug on the floor.
Well, speaking of putting a poster on the wall, your new venture is freaking cool. And I have to quote my girlfriend before we get into it, in saying that this is going to alleviate a lot of arguments between us.
Nice. Well, hold on before you get there. Sorry, we went on a little bit of a tangent.
Make sure you like and subscribe.
Thank you.
To this channel.
Thank you. So you had left Google and you were interested in this kind of problem space of people working in 3D. So I didn't actually know this part of your story. So what were you working on? What did you start?
Yeah. So right before Google, we had a startup that was actually a design tool that was meant for 2D interaction design. It was called Form. It's very similar to Quartz Composer. Origami is node-based programming. And I just really during that process fell in love with visual programming. Mm-hmm. Like I can code okay in with traditional programming, but there's something about nodes and seeing the graph and the flow of information just really stuck with me. So when I went to go learn Unity and Unreal and all this stuff, I was really missing kind of that tool of it just seems really fundamentally broken. I need to take my headset off and modify some shader code just to modify a couple things. Why can't I just put a bunch of nodes in the air and connect them and see the flow of information and modify stuff? And right when I was kind of working on that stuff, ARKit dropped, and I built up a little side project with the Mapbox SDK that essentially took the 3D elevation information, built a map, and then put my Strava bike ride on top. I had that project kind of working in Unity. ARKit dropped, so I repurposed that project just as an ARKit test, and tweeted out a video of it. I think this was like maybe an hour after the SDK actually went live.
Was this the one that did the atmospheric clouds and stuff, or is this predate that?
Predates that a little bit, but we added the atmospheric clouds.
I used that. We'll get into that, but I used that as a example all the time back in the day of like well done AR. But go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and no, it's totally good. And then the demo that I built still had like the blue debug plane detection and like the yellow
the
dot
stock
of like
the stock plane finder.
Totally. I was just like, but you know what I've learned is that the more debug stuff you leave in, the more technical it seems to people who are not engineers.
Yeah.
So like when you have like the scene kit graph at the bottom that's like 60 FPS and like dropped frames, they're like, wow, this is some crazy stuff.
This is cutting edge.
But when it's really polished, they're just like, wow, this is kind of janky. Like the map's floating all over the place.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
I think that's why it's harder, and I don't want to rant about this, but I think it's why it's harder shipping a consumer experience.
Oh, yes.
Because when you like record your video, everyone expects you to be perfect, but when you're putting something on Twitter with like debug information, they're like, oh, we know it's jank.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Like we're seeing the promise versus the final product.
Well, you're also displaying to people who understand your challenges in the second on the second piece. You're on Twitter. You're showing the facial recognition square around the person's face as they're they're moving around, and they understand the tech behind the debug, and so it becomes more impressive to that small little tiny group of dorks like us that get it. Yeah, I mean, like, well, and it really depends on like I always ask our clients, who is the arbiter of taste on this project, right? Like who, and then let me talk to that person. Have them give me a tear book. Like, give me the what is it that they are looking to see? And if they send me a whole bunch of Iron Man's basement and stuff like that, I know what direction we're going. But you can't please everybody. You just can't. You have to please the person you're going to pay. And sadly, in consumer, that's everyone. Right?
And what? So that neatly touches on a thread here, which is so I tweeted out that video, and I think it was like one of the first ARKit, and then the Mapbox folks saw it because I tagged them in it, and we ended up kind of chatting with them, and they're like, hey, what are you planning on doing with this? And then once a video does well on Twitter, or like your friends are like, hey, this is really cool, I think that entrepreneur side of you kicks in.
That's a signal.
Like, the same way.
Right.
Where you're like, am I allowed to curse on this show, by the way? It's just like,
you can fucking curse all you want, dude.
Okay, cool. I've got a funny story about cursing when I shouldn't have, and I won't do these things. And I was just like, oh shit, now I have to do it. Like now I have to shit.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's like a leading indicator this is cool, and like I don't have anything else going on other than this like tool or thing that I want to build. It's like, fuck, I got to do this. So we built it out as like a consumer iOS app, and I think it took us a month from like us firing the starting gun to like submitting it to the App Store. But one of the key things that I learned was like,
I'm sorry, Adam. What was it? What were you? I wasn't keeping in.
No, sorry.
What was it that you were building? Yeah.
Yeah, it was an app that let you put your bike rides and your runs from Strava on top of like a 3D map, and you could project that into AR. So any of your runs or your hikes or your bike rides, you can kind of see much more.
Where did you get the DEM data?
We got it all we got the map data from Mapbox, and then we got the fitness data, of course, from your Strava account.
Right. So I'm going to dive just really quick into a super deep little chasm of dorkiness. What projection matrix did you use Did Strava and Mapbox use the same projection matrix, or did you have to reproject, or did it matter at that scale? Because we did a project of the Eastern Pacific, and one of the datas was in one mapping projection, and the other set of data was in another one, and we had to freaking hire a mathematician to tweak one into the other.
I'm gonna take a wild guess, given the setup, that this was just a Twitter video demo, and say that there was some hacky jankiness going on there to register those two things together.
So yeah, for both the consumer experience and the Twitter demo, what we did was we just got the GPX data from Strava, which was like essentially just a giant array of like lat long points. And then the Mapbox SDK allowed you to display a map with like bounds. So it's like, give me, center of the map at this lat long.
You used Mapbox's projection and then took the GPS lat long X, Y, and Z coordinates and projected them onto that projection. I got it.
Yeah, exactly. But we had this funny thing happen where we had to figure out how to like draw a line because the Mapbox SDK at the time didn't offer any kind of drawing routes. So my buddy Eric, who I worked on the app with, figured out a way where we took all the dots of like the lat longs and we projected it, or we placed it on top of the map, and then we raycast it down and then formed the line that way.
Oh,
so
God.
I think that was the jankiest thing that we did in that app.
Sorry, it was like a bajillion polygon polyline on top of everything?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it somehow worked. But actually, nice. The jankiest thing that we did, and we, Paul, you and I have talked about this on Twitter, is I'm coming from Material, like I really care about building native UIs on the systems that we deploy to. So everything that was an AR in that iOS app was UIKit, and only the AR component was Unity. So we had to embed the Unity binary and the runtime and wrap it into standard UIKit app. And I think Eric, it took 1 month, but I think it took like 6 years of his life. Yeah. Like he was getting gray hairs after it. And
that was before well, hold on, to credit to Eric, because it's taking years off my life, and it's supposedly an officially supported thing now. Like, so back then I can't imagine.
Paul has lost probably 4 years in the past 3 months.
Yeah. And our binary was like, I think 200 megs.
Oh yeah. I don't know if this is still the case, but I did it. A totally empty Unity project built to iOS is 100 megs. That used to be the case. I think it probably.
Yeah, it was a totally insane process. I mean, it was so janky that I could only deploy from my laptop because Eric set up like all the Xcode build flags and like all the stuff, and he's like, "Don't ever update this laptop."
Yeah.
Unplug it from the internet. Right.
But seriously, totally.
Yeah.
And we could never hook it up to Xcode where it would keep running. So like you'd build from Xcode, it would hard crash.
Yep.
Then we would need to unplug the device, run it on the device, and then hope it works, and then plug it back in, and we would have the debug text as strings in AR.
Yeah.
So like it's like Unity crash error, blah 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 blah, or like Xcode build error, blah blah blah, and like that was the way we were debugging stuff because it was just so janky.
It's a little better, but like right now with this current project, I have a shell script, and it actually I have a Unity build script. I have to choose a target platform. Interestingly, Android is easier to iterate on because of this, because of the whole Xcode thing. But for iOS, if I want to iterate the Unity side and test it in the actual host app, I've basically got to make my changes in Unity, fire off a Unity as library build, which generates an Xcode project that then gets linked into the Flutter build. Then I have to rebuild the Flutter APK, and then for iOS, build the Flutter Xcode project. Then I can't even run it from the command line. I've got to open the proper workspace in Xcode to launch it, because if I try to do anything outside, I've actually, Spencer was making fun of me because we're working with another team that's doing the mobile side of it, and I'm basically writing a white paper on how the project the project is architected and how it works and how it's set up, and I don't see any reason why I shouldn't probably publish that eventually, but it's not much better. But to do that,
it's spectacular. I mean, he's got circles and arrows and descriptions on the back of each one, and I mean, it's amazing.
I like a good Google Doc, that's I can't imagine doing this a few years ago. It's janky still. So I said, this is using supported known things. They just don't work very well. So to figure it out beforehand. Yeah. So it sounds like you were, we should probably talk to him about, it sounds like you're basically monkey patching the Unity Xcode project and hacking it to run your UIKit stuff on top of it.
And we're super, there's a strategy component to this as well as of course you have better user experience having UIKit take care of the actual UIs. Also the strategy component of so much of this is new territory for users that you want to kind of not reinvent the wheel if you don't have to on things that are not
make them feel safe.
Yep.
Yeah, and it really, really helped us with Apple.
Yep.
When we spoke with them maybe the first day we started working on this stuff, and we were one of the only apps that had any UIKit.
Yeah.
And being able to kind of do that helped us get featured and promoted and all that stuff. So that helped us a lot there too. And also being able to deploy test flights super easily.
Yeah.
And then get that into people's hands with press and with partners and all that stuff. We kind of knew there was a wave of AR kit launch press that was coming, and we kind of wanted to ride that wave.
Was it at this point as we being Mapbox? Did you join Mapbox as a?
No.
This was still.
This is still independent. Yeah. But we ended up spinning up an LLC around it because we knew something was going to happen with it. We were charging, I think, $2 per app install, but it was, Eric and I essentially just split the proceeds. But we wanted to spin up an LLC just to make this stuff,
What was the name of your LLC?
It was called Built on AR. It was very basic. And pretty much the first couple of days we started building it, we reached out to Mapbox and Strava being hey, we want to be really good Samaritans of your brand, and we're building this cool thing. We think there's going to be this potential of a bunch of AR kit press, and Apple's definitely going to feature this stuff. How can we make your brand look great? How can we make Mapbox and Strava feel like they're part of this huge kind of new era of computing and all that stuff? So even though we were paid, we got their press agencies, both of them, to promote the app. So they put us in touch with journalists, and they blogged about us and tweeted about us and stuff. And that's how we got on all these publications that were the best AR kit apps. And I think just doing that little bit of BD sales work really helped us a lot, because it allowed us to kind of rise to the top of kind of new AR kit. And if there's any advice I could give to maybe people that are out there, they're watching, it's the stuff that you're building is perfect because you create some beautiful visual artifacts for it. Your stuff, it's really easy to sell.
Yeah.
Because it's super visual, and you're building stuff in 3D space where people instantly get it. You're not an enterprise SaaS app where you need to demonstrate the value with illustrations and bullet points. Like you just be like, I built this fucking thing. Here's a 15-second video clip. I don't need to say anything other than watch the video clip because you should fucking get it.
Right.
And doing a little bit of that kind of BD work will make your stuff just like fly. So I'm sad that we did that because
I think
got
that's
a lot of press and distribution.
I mean, I think it's a clever. I mean, like we do have a lot of people in the chat and in the community that they're trying to figure out how to make a career out of it, or how to create an opportunity out of this. And I think that was really savvy on your part to not go to Mapbox and Strava and say, we're doing your stuff in AR and you should be doing AR things. It's more like we're attaching this to the juggernaut of Apple, and this is your opportunity. Like we're using your data. So like I think that's such a hard thing for people to understand, the motivations of other people and companies. And like, that was such a smart way to play that, where you're like, I think it's a tough thing for people to realize just because something is an AR does not make it valuable or cool. Right. That's a tough one for a lot of people to like it. We see it's not just AR either, right? We see this with blockchain and like any AI, and
3D at the beginning of the whole 3D thing.
Yeah. So I mean, props for having that kind of what I would call BD mentality, that business development mentality around that, because that's important.
Yeah, I was going to actually make fun of you for putting UI kit on top of on stuff, and just so you could get into Apple, I was going to call you a little slutty, but it's actually super smart. It's actually a really, really great way to do that. That made a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, thanks. I need to make sure you like and subscribe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, like and subscribe. Hit that bell icon.
I'm sorry we're having some we had a little technical difficulty, so I'm relaying out Spencer
I turned off my camera
as we speak.
I was trying to take a screenshot and
technology. So I definitely want to get a primer. I mean, we're almost an hour in and we're not talking about your current thing yet, but this is all super interesting. Like to hear how, I think it is interesting for our particular audience, like how to hear the journey of people that have kind of been in this for years at this point, and to hear all the crazy ways that you get into these things. I mean, like, is it fair to say that like you just tinkering on a project that you're really interested in, sharing a video online kind of opened that door for you? And like, that wasn't necessarily your intent in doing that, right? Like to start, then once you saw the interest, you're like, wait a minute, I'm onto something here. Like this is something. Then you put on the entrepreneur hat.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that entrepreneur hat is kind of a, I don't think it's an innate thing. I think it's kind of like a learned skill, right? Where it's like, hey, this really cool stuff, like. People are not that unique, right? It's like, if you think something's really fucking cool, other people are going to think it's really fucking cool. And if you, I'm blanking on his name, but there's a Wired writer who coined this, where it's like enthusiasm is worth 25 IQ points. Like, if you talk to other people at companies,
that's why people think I'm smart.
Yeah, and if you like talk to other people at companies and they're like, hey, I built this thing using your SDK or in your orbit, and I'm super stoked about it, and it's gonna make your stuff look awesome, like they're gonna be stoked and they're gonna help you out, right? And
definitely. I mean, for me, like as a entrepreneur raising money, I got the feedback, I am too laid back, I'm too southern genteel, too relaxed. And it was like that, my constant feedback from like when you talk to friendly investors or people that like actually give you honest feedback was like, I don't like you need to be standing up and like you need to be like, and I'm just like, that's just not my style. Like I don't know, for whatever reason, but there is some.
I think this is one of the reasons why you and I really work together in those
for sure
situations, is that I stand up and I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And I just yammer, and they're like, whoa, that's entertaining. And then Paul will like gently kind of like well, and here's the facts, and he'll kind of like do the he'll lay it out as to actually what's going on, and then people will be like, oh, that's cool, and then what's the crazy guy got to say, And so
you end up kind of developing a dance, right? With that kind of app that we've been talking about, we ended up actually just selling it to Mapbox. So we got, I guess, the Silicon Valley term is acqui-hired by Mapbox to kind of build out their AR team and SDKs and stuff. And that was very similar to the dance that you both of you are talking about with fundraising. It's very similar with acquisitions as it is with talking to VC firms or angels. And it's a little bit of that, like, you have to have this like quiet confidence of like, hey, like, it would be awesome if we joined your company. It'd be awesome if I took your money.
Oh, absolutely.
At the same time, like, I've got this awesome plan where I don't need this.
This is okay, and I love that, because this is why it's really important to have some runway in your business. You have to have runway, because if you need that person, if you need them, they can feel it and they can smell it, and then you're fucked. And I don't want to get like I don't want to turn this into like VC talk, but like that really is like the core of any deal is like, is time leverage for you or is it leverage for another person?
Yeah.
And like so many startups, right, just get like fucked where you end up needing to create leverage in any deal, right? So you do this thing where you're like, oh, I'm like chatting with other firms. So like, I'm like, I'm expecting term sheets next week, even though you're like not talking to anyone. So you need to do all these like weird jitsus. And like, I think us three are just like good natured and kind of introverted and nerdy. So we can't pull that off. But what ends up happening is these VC firms or companies that want to acquire you, time is on their side. So they're like, oh, great, I'll just wait.
Yeah.
I'll just wait a month.
They don't have near the motivation you do.
Totally. So
which is why you want that runway. So you also can wait. And you're like, yeah, fine. That's great.
That's what you said is what I say is I'm not a bullshitter, which is like, like I said, I just talked to a friend yesterday who's like about to start down this road. He's about to raise. He moved to San Francisco. He's going to raise around, and like, it's so funny because once you go through this and you really see in hindsight the things you messed up or the things that didn't work, like you're so ready to like help someone like navigate that stuff. And I started getting into like signaling and like like all the different things you have to factor in and all like venture capitalists, like they do these deals, they talk to people every day. I was like, you will never have I think out of 70 or 80 fund meetings with funds that I've had, maybe 2 or 3 were actual bad meetings where I was like, this is going real awkward or bad, or I don't like these people or they don't like me. But the 99% of the meetings were great meetings where everybody's real interested and they like, and it's in their,
everyone's professionally excited.
Professionally excited is a perfect word for it. And it's in their best interest to do it that way. And at the same time, like the types of terms and deals and things that you have to navigate as a founder, as an entrepreneur, like you'll only do this a few times in your life at the most. Whereas these people deal with it regularly. So everything is tilted in their favor. And if you don't have a right mentor network or support network to help you see these things, like, and so like, I'm even more impressed when a very young person who's just like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed manages to pull some of this stuff off. Cause you gotta be like me. You gotta be street smart.
You're talking about me, right?
You gotta be a little street smart with some of this stuff.
Well, I almost want to like, this is probably a conversation for another day, but I almost want to like write a blog post or something where it's like, hey, if you are doing anything in AR, VR space, like here's how you raise a pre-seed round.
Yeah.
Because there's so much potential.
I'll introduce you to my friend.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, definitely. Please. I need give me more deal flow.
It's more therapy for me than anything.
Yeah, because there's all these like little things that happen that like you only find out were mistakes. That
nobody could tell you that they were going to happen.
Totally. And I think 100% of our investment dollars, we've now done 2 rounds. 100% of our investment dollars were done through warm intros. Mm-hmm. So they were like all relationships. And like, unless you have that relationship network, it's really, really hard to send cold emails and get meetings.
Yeah.
Which just creates like massive systematic problems, right? It's like massive problems with diversity, massive problems with like type of deals.
Oh, I said at least yesterday in that conversation, I said at least twice, this is a setup. This system is optimized for privileged men. Like very obviously, and like even
100%.
I'm like I definitely fit in the privileged man category, but like it's actually tuned for the aggressive privileged man. And so I'm lacking the aggressive part sometimes because it's just not my personality or my style. But like
and that sucks. And I gotta say, I've talked with college students a lot. I've done lectures and stuff, and my overriding advice to everybody is don't be a dick, right? But that's actually not true. If you look at how money gets made, is like don't be a dick is actually a really great life lesson and something we should all do. But what you guys are talking about is that no, actually, the white men who were dicks are doing better because they are aggressive and they are, being like that. Like, how can we change that? How can we change it so that people who aren't dicks and who are kind and generous and pay their people well and do the right thing.
I'm sorry, Spencer, that doesn't sound like a 10x business to me or 100x business. So I'm gonna have to say no.
Well, fuck that then.
Well, I mean, but both of you guys have been through the fundraising process now, and it's very interesting to see how quickly huge amounts of money are decided. Like whether you get that $1 million seed round or whatever, and it takes like
$1 billion of.
Right, of course, Matt. Right, of course, yes. Sorry, my primer is Trump change. That's like a rounding error on your tax forms.
But you were asking.
That was always.
I'm sorry.
No, I was saying that's always what kind of surprised me at the process. Like just huge amounts of money are like kind of allocated almost subjectively, especially in the pre-seed aspect, and like so much of how we trust people is like that unconscious bias of like, do you look like me? Like I had one investor meeting, so early in the day, and like this is earlier in the day, where we both went skiing in Big Sky, and we just talked about skiing for the first like 20 minutes of the call. Right, and then like the rest of the 40 minutes is about all that stuff, and it was like, okay, that first 20 minutes was bonding, but like I could only go ski there because like I had wealthy tech salary and like my parents taught me how to ski and all this stuff, and like I probably wouldn't have bonded with that person if I didn't have those privileges growing up. So yeah, I worked really fucking hard, and that 40 minutes was like, I'm sure, well thought out or whatever, but like it was built on a baseline of trust, and I was always given the benefit of the doubt. And I think that whole system needs a little bit of reform just to like how we allocate.
Oh, for sure. I mean, by the way, this is a whole other conversation, but if people are interested in this type of conversation, I would say a good starting point is there's a couple of her Twitter name is Arlan was here, ARLALAN. She is a Black woman that has been in the startup world and recognized these like disadvantages, and she's a VC, and she has been obviously invests in people that don't have those advantages. And there's another one in the Portland scene. There's a founder, her name's Mara Zapata, and she started this idea of zebra startups, which are and then like a little bit further in the spectrum is there's a couple funds like NDVC where they're not there's a couple of threads of this problem, and one is obviously the ones we've just talked about around bias and privilege, and then there's another one around just the system itself, around the expectation of, depending upon who your investors are, their expectations of what you're going to do next with your company, your next round. And like NDVC has tried to innovate some of these models where they're not trying to build a fund around oh, well, we invest in at this valuation, we expect the next round to be a 10x or 100x type of thing. So there's, I would say Arlen was here as a good starting point. Mata Zapata is another. NDVC is interesting. But anyway, so yeah, sorry, not very XR related, but that's
no,
okay.
totally. And I'd say if you're a founder, just like please shoot me a DM or
other founders are great sources.
An email.
People that have been through the ringer.
Just like I'm happy to like intro you. Like our lead on our pre-seed has been great and has been actively working on this exact problem that we're talking about.
Nice.
Once again, happy to
like and subscribe to Adam.
Yeah. Hey, Adam.
Subscribe to me.
Hey, Adam on Twitter. So we are over 1 hour in, and we have not talked about your current things. I want to make sure we give it some time.
I know. Come on, let's talk about it. I got things to say.
Well, so let's do a little. I'm going to try to switch over to the browser here. Here we go. We did it. So your current company's Primer, and don't let me totally blow off anything you wanted to cover, but I did want to get this out here because we've touched on it a little bit. So it's available in the iOS App Store currently. It is interior decorating or pre-visualizing interior finishes in your home. I've already said it earlier, but I will say it again. I think this is like a really good example of the level of AR that we should expect right now, which is meaning it's like it's using the most reliable and most valuable parts of AR in a very kind of well designed, well thought out way. It's definitely super. So now that we've heard a little bit of your background, because I was going to ask about cross-platform, and it definitely felt like to me like this is a mobile app that has AR functionality, obviously very front and center, but now it's clear to me where the philosophy behind that has come from. So I would assume this is a UI, like all native UI and just scene kit, AR kit, like no other layers on top of it, no other crazy stuff going on.
No, just scene kit, metal, UI kit. Actually, the entire UI is all Swift UI, including anything in AR that's two-dimensional.
And I think the thing that everyone noticed first, and we actually had a question about it in the chat, so I definitely want to just hit that first. So like for Torch, like I talked about earlier about how we had a lot of usability kind of ahas and things that we had to find out the hard way. And getting that first time user experience, that first time getting localized and initialized and them actually seeing the content is such a critical point. And it's such a new flow from a user experience perspective. And what's interesting, what's most different about Primer and is the first thing you'll see in the first minute is this idea of touching your phone to the wall to kind of calibrate to the wall. So like, how did that come about? Like, what is the process behind that? Like, tell us all about like the design of the app is beautiful. And so I'd love to hear everything you've learned about it and all of that.
Yeah, thanks. That we were in our pre-seed fundraising process and we had a little prototype built that was using a standard vertical plane detection from ARKit. And we had a huge problem, which was if you're trying to change a wall color or you're trying to put something on a wall, the wall's probably fairly barren. Mm-hmm. So there's no feature points on it.
Right.
So I remember like very vividly, we were in this like pitch meeting and, it was going pretty great. I mean, they were being professionally nice, but I genuinely felt it was going great. And they're like, oh yeah, can we see it? And I'm like, sure. It's like, take out my iPhone. And I'm just like, they have like a brand.
Was it all whiteboard walls?
Super shiny white wall.
Right. So and it was Magic Leap Corporation.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And the other walls were glass.
Yeah, I was gonna say, or either that must be a nightmare. You walk in and it's all whiteboard. It's a whiteboard wall or glass. It's just like, oh.
Totally. So my, it's my co-founder Russ, who's great. and I were just trying to like figure this out, and we're like, how do we stall while this thing is like calibrating? So we were like, oh, how can you guys be helpful? Like, well, how's your firm different than like other firms? You know, while we're trying to get this like fucking tracking to work, and it like wouldn't pick up. And it finally, we picked it up on one of those like fire release things, or I forget what it's called, but like the fire alarm things. So we picked it up on that, and we mounted the swatch, and we're like, okay, we need to fix this because this is like a huge existential crisis for like us even having a company. So we had our bud Tim, who's now our technical advisor, Tim Donnelly, who's just like the best engineer in the world. And
except for Paul.
Except for Paul, yeah. We have to make sure we stack rank this.
Wait, Josh is in the chat though, so.
Oh shit! Except for Josh and Paul. Oh,
Josh.
Never mind. I'm just going to shut up now. Yeah.
And he was like, well, why don't you guys just use the wall tracking? And we're like, oh, we could like track off the floor. And we quickly built this little prototype where you just kind of like nudge the wall. And our original intent was to actually capture through the accelerometer.
Oh, that your momentum is stopped. Yep.
Yeah, so it was going to be this like magic nudge. Yeah, and we couldn't get like it would just fire prematurely, or it just wouldn't fire at all. So like, let's just make it a button. But yeah, that was the intent. Was like the logic is super simple. It just figures out the orientation of the device, and it knows that it's like going to be perpendicular to the wall, and that's how it mounts it. So it never uses any vertical plane detection.
But I have to say that I just tried it with my 2020 iPad, and you just recognized the wall. I didn't have to do any of that stuff. I just like, there was like, there's the wall, and you just touch the wall, and there it is. So you guys have already built in the LiDAR support, right?
Yeah, and LiDAR for us is like super important because, especially when you're like sitting on your couch or you're in a pitch meeting, it's way more powerful to be like, oh, this is how it works. Tap on the wall, and it fills up. It's a lot better than kind of the nudge and tap. And it's interesting because like that, only Apple. I think it's just a fascinating thing about Apple that's like really overlooked is Apple. There's so many startups like 60 AI and Scape and some other folks did all this like point cloud initialization stuff where they're like, we're just going to use one camera and build a crazy amount of CV and ML models to like understand your space. And like, that's the way we're going to do occlusion. That's the way we're going to do instant AR placement. And we're going to put up an insane amount of resources to learning it. And then Apple's like, well, that's cool. We're just going to use our factories and use our operations and use our scale to just like make LiDAR sensors like free. So gonna ship it on every device. So cool story, bro.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh shit. Like, so when we saw the LiDAR stuff, right, immediately we were like, oh, okay, that helps solve this huge problem for us that we can just like tap on a wall.
So share as much as you'd like, but like, because you'd already talked about how your evolution through Mapbox and kind of this focus on native UI and true to the OS user interface. So you already had a relationship with Apple. So did you get an early peek at the LiDAR stuff? Like, do they consider you a premier example of how this stuff works? Or were you?
Yeah. So what I'll say is like when you're building native stuff on the platform, whenever they do kind of publicly release it, like your stuff already automatically works. Like I think Unity had, almost like a month buffer to it. So yeah, it's like we got all those advantages kind of downstream immediately. I can't like talk too much about
sure, yeah,
stuff, unfortunately, because Apple's lawyers are scary. But you're excited.
You're excited about the LiDAR functionality, and you think it's something that'll be something you can rely on as a functionality going forward. Like it's like you've already adopted it. So like the current version of Primer in the App Store is fully utilizing the LiDAR capability and aside from what they did another thing they did a really great job of is like ARKit is also leveraging the LiDAR sensor, but like not with any intervention on the developer's part, right? Like it's just better, right? It just works better.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, So I can talk about the technical details because technically it's really, really interesting. So they expose two different layers of it. They expose like a depth API, which essentially gives you the raw information from the sensor as a like 200 and I forgot the pixel counter, but as like a pretty low res image, and it gives you
And it's
the
basically pixel distance from sensor. Is that's like in a
yeah.
grayscale?
It I think it is colored, but yeah, it essentially is. It essentially works the same way like a normal map does, right? So you get information from the color. So what we do on the primer side, which is I think pretty unique and different from maybe how other people do it, is we actually take that and we like upsample it using metal shaders, and then we do like really smart. I want to dumb it down, but like really, we do smart edge detection on figuring
Yeah.
out essentially what the boundaries of furniture are, and then we use that to occlude the virtual objects versus relying on Apple's scene geometry APIs.
Dude, that's super smart. I mean,
Yeah.
that's got to be way less cycles to like sharpen something and then use that resultant edge mesh as a mask than to like grab all of the data that you possibly can from the LiDAR thing and use a full res thing. That's super smart.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is, and there's great like WWDC talks on this, is the scene geometry API. They're running ML models on top of the depth API to essentially create geometries.
Right.
And that gives you like kind of jaggedy edges. It gives you kind of like polygons,
Right.
which
Yeah.
are really, really important for you to do like collision detection. Like if you want to like drop a bunch of balls in the scene and have it bounce off
Sure.
your couch, that's great. Like that's what you want. But for us,
Right.
we know we're never going to do that stuff. We just want the cleanest kind of edges around things.
So you just made a reference to Matt's 60 AI ball
Oh,
demo. Yeah. So I got to tell you, when Paul and the Torch folks were kind of like doing a little love dance with 60 AI for a while, and while they were doing that, I thought, fuck, it would be so great to mount a GoPro on my head, and then have like a shirt full of those ball pit balls, and just walk up to Paul's desk and just start throwing balls at Paul. I thought it would have been viral, man. I could have been.
dude, it's April Fool's prank, man.
Like, look at the 60 AI on Paul. It's amazing.
And I really love Matt. He's a really good dude. I kind of want to send him as an April Fool's joke, like primer, like our materials as like balls that we just throw off the wall.
Yeah. We should just send Matt. You know what we should do right now? We should just, all three of us, put in $25 and buy a shit ton of
a ball pit
and just
make him a ball pit
and just send them to Matt. Yeah.
It should be Pokeballs because of Niantic.
Yeah.
Like, congrats on the acquisition, man.
I'm not painting all those. No, just.
So did we get into? I feel like we may have messed up a little bit. The chat was someone in the chat said, "What is primer?" we may have skipped. We may have skipped. No, just I think this was asked earlier. I think we may have skipped straight into the technical part. But like, can you give like a high level? I think I just showed the website and we just jumped right into the wall tap thing.
Yeah, totally. So primer, we kind of set out with this mission of like making it super easy for you to like reimagine what your space could look like. And our first version of that kind of experience is allowing you to visualize paint, wallpaper, and tiles from different brands and essentially see them directly in your space. So if you like, have this like wall behind me, like you want to like repaint it or put up some wallpaper or even put up some tiles, you can kind of see directly in that space what that would look like. Now, it's really important for interior designers that are like complementing furniture or flooring they already have, or like a fireplace. It's really important for brands as well. When they're like designing new products, they can like quickly test out like what actually looks good or not. And then for consumers, it reduces a lot of the burden of like going to the store, getting a paint swatch, putting a little bit on the wall, and then needing to imagine, like stretched all the way across the wall, like, okay, this is a bold color, but is this actually going to look cool at like scale?
Yeah,
And then
so we were testing it out in our kitchen, that the cabinets are this matte kind of olive green, and we have this one wall that is fairly empty, and the default swatch that came up was a green tile pattern for us, and I was like, oh, this looks cool, but as soon as I backed up and the cabinetry was in the frame, I was like, oh, but it looks awful with, like, it was because it was like an off shade of green on the wall, and I was like, oh, but it doesn't look good with these cabinets. Like, it was instant, it was like in the moment, within a minute, I could previs and see.
You could tell.
Yeah,
right.
I just knew. Yeah, it was wrong. It's just bad.
Yeah.
So Paul, I sent you 3
I have
images.
it. Yep.
Yeah. So when we bought this house, it was this kind of like terrible greeny yellow color, and my girlfriend was a little bit, she's relatively conservative about like how she wants to portray herself to the neighborhood, and my immediate thought was, let's make this thing black. We're gonna make a black house. And she's like, no, I don't think so. That's not going to happen on my house, because she's the owner of the house. So I don't get to actually choose the color. And so what we did was, I took a picture of the house in this kind of weird green color. And then I went into Photoshop and I did exactly what you guys are doing with Primer. I just masked out the siding and masked out the door. I was like, okay, black house, red door. What does that look like? And so that's how it looks like. That's what it looked like when she bought it. And then
this was your previs of it.
The previs was this.
And then this is
like totally different.
And then this is the real thing.
An actual photo.
That's cool.
Right. So like what you're doing, like I said earlier, it's like, this concept of Primer being able to look at a wall, like it was great. I just showed my gal our entrance wall with how does it look with shiny tiles on it. And she's like, oh shit, that's kind of cool. And so like it really does kind of inspire you to experiment with different ways of, like, you can visualize. I love the idea of visualizing your environment in 3D or in AR or whatever, and then being able to like make that thing happen, and then it feels like what you thought it was going to feel like. It's really, yeah. I love it. I'm stoked. I'm going to use it.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. So one of the things that got us kind of really excited about this from the get-go is we really thought that entire space of visualizing stuff that's like any projects you want to do around your home was a fundamentally broken experience. And we got excited about that problem versus getting really excited about the technical solution. Right. And I thought that's a really, really important distinction. Because when we were pitching this, or when we were kind of figuring out what the company was, everything was like balanced against what's like the real problem humans have and not like problems products have. And that introduced, I think, a lot of clarity for us on where we needed to invest in the tech and where we just didn't need to invest in the tech.
There's a really good book. I think I'm the Lean Product Handbook or Lean Product something or other, and they talk about the problem space versus the solution space. And it's so tempting to work and think in the solution space and get detached from the problem space. And it's something very, it's especially in a technical domain, it's something very easy to get caught up in. But I think that book did a really good job of helping you detach, the product you're building is in the market that you're in, and to talk about the problem versus the solution space, which I think is exactly that. Like, and it shows, like, you can tell an app that's like they just think by virtue of the fact it has an AR capability is the thing, when it's really the consumer does not care. They really do not care.
And you know, I got directly, like, this was kind of a hard one lesson, right? Like, we got burned by the design tool that we built before Google, where we just built stuff that we thought was technically really, really cool and things that we were curious about. And we just kind of assumed that we would apply it in places that would make sense. I mean, it was kind of similar to maybe the Magic Leap problem that you all experienced, where like we're building a technical foundation that we think is awesome, and like people can use it for X, Y, and Z reasons, or they can apply it in these ways, but only after the technology was built.
Yeah.
So it was like technology looking for a problem set versus like a problem looking for tech. And that, I think me being burned by that was like really important for Primer, because like everything was levied against like, is this a real problem, or are we just like building cool tech? It's like, it's awesome to build cool tech, but like, let's make sure that like, if we invest years of our lives into this thing, it's going to be used and it's going to be like a real business.
Yeah, you know, the
right. And I got to say that there are a million solutions to a million problems out there right now that can be solved. All these solutions can be implemented with tech that currently exists. We don't have to invent new crazy ways of fixing these problems. We can fix them with very simple ways that we have right now.
Yeah, I was going to say the other challenge in that, the reason why this is so tricky is like, especially when you're in a new, like the difficult problem with Torch was detaching the customer feedback or the solution space with the fact that most people don't realize what are the problem space. People don't realize what solutions are possible. So like, you know, we were mobile only. You could only build on mobile. And we thought that was really important for a lot of reasons. But we constantly got the request for, can I go to desktop? Can I build on desktop? And it's a really tough one, because you're like, well, is the customer asking because they want to go to desktop because that's what they're comfortable with? Or is it actually the better workflow? And it was like, so that's the right type of conversation to be having, is like, are we holding on to this thing philosophically, or do we know that this is this the best solution to the customer? Because ultimately that's all they care about. And in the case of the desktop versus mobile, I don't, you know, we continued on, I don't doubt that a desktop workflow would have become a part of the roadmap, because it just became like, you've just got to sit back at the end of the day and say, yeah, like with a mouse and a keyboard and a screen, there's things you can do better and faster.
Yeah, but then you're basically just like trying to muscle in on Photoshop and
no. Well, the
4D,
difference,
Max,
and that's
Maya,
where the difference lies. The difference lies in, you don't fully pivot. You basically say, what about this is more efficient, and then you say, what parts of it can we incorporate? But yeah, like, I mean, this is where you start to hear the Henry Ford, like, if I gave people what they wanted, that would have made a faster horse, right? Like, that was that. Yeah. It's that age old. It's that age old thing.
I've never heard that before.
Oh yeah.
I've never heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, for us, when we talk to our kind of brand partners, they definitely are not AR VR nerds.
Yeah.
They're not techies at all. And when we show them a demo or a prototype, they're not thinking, oh, this is a really cool implementation of ARKit. They're thinking, oh wow, this is in my camera feed. Yeah. This is in my like video. They're like, oh great, can I put this on top of other videos that I don't take at the time?
Right.
And we're like, no.
So what I'm hearing from both of you is that you need to listen to your client. You need to listen to
not
the
only,
people,
I mean, like, it's a special, yes, and it's a special type of listening, because you've got you're deriving, you're listening to them, but they don't know how to articulate. They can only articulate their pain and their problem, and then you've got to figure out everything in between.
So we kind of occupy this space of kind of sensei, where we
Yeah.
know all of the possible moves. And then we look at our client, and they are obviously only able to do 2 or 3 of those moves, and so we teach them those moves first.
Well, you
And
parse the
and we make
constraints.
them happy with them.
This goes back to the earlier conversation about design and constraint. You're helping them establish the constraints, and they don't know the possibilities, but they also don't like they don't. It's also somewhat beautiful in a way. They don't care. They just want their problem solved, and like it's got to be like, to me, this is why I'm so fascinated by the product space and why I really love it, because you've really got to think about all these things, like, because the other wrong answer is, all the possible things is also the wrong answer. Right.
Well, and a perfect example of this is what Paul's going through right now with trying to get AR Core, Unity, Flutter, iOS, Android, all of this shit working together. Is that no one is ever going to care about what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's doing all of this insane magic behind the scenes, and no one is ever going to see it. No one's going to, unless it
only
breaks.
if the experience takes advantage. Like, only if we produce an experience that is not possible any other way, or like it's unique.
It's funny too, because I actually think you can wow people sometimes better with traditional mobile tech than you can with AR stuff, because people, as you said, don't realize how difficult this thing is to pull off, and they don't realize how finicky the core technology can
and if
be.
it's jerky and it moves around, then they think it's bad.
So a lot of the advice, so a lot of the feedback that we get from the brands that we work with are like really fundamental, basic things. They're like, hey, can it do X, Y, and Z? Can you do flooring? Can you like put multiple swatches? And it's things that are like really technically difficult. And if you talk to an engineer, it's like, oh my gosh, we need to build.
You're murdering me.
To make that stuff.
Yeah,
but to a brand, it's like it's just a natural thing, because they interact with the real world every day. And I think that brings up like a really interesting strategy component to it, which is you just need to be extremely surgical about what industry or what solution you really want to work on. That AR is really the only tool for that thing to become a reality and for that problem set to be solved. Because if you're trying to just make incremental improvements about something, and AR is like 20% better than the traditional tools, you're just gonna be fucked, because it's 100 times harder to build. And if you're only getting like a 2x return on that, it's totally not worth your time.
Right.
I mean, it's a really cool side project, and like I don't discourage anyone from building stuff, but in terms of like actually building a business around it, it's a completely different calculus. That's why when stuff becomes commoditized, right? That's when like a lot of these tool sets are going to be easier to work on, and like platforms are going to be more mature and all this stuff. Suddenly, all the things that we're talking about and dreaming of, like we're going to be cool if this industry did that, we're going to be cool if this product did that, all of that stuff will be unlocked, because suddenly you get the 2x returns, but it's only like 1.5x as hard.
Well, I mean, that's the plight of the XR entrepreneur, right? We're constantly nibbling on that edge, thinking, well, maybe, yes, it's hard now, but it's like, yes, it's weird now, but it's going to be like huge in demand and easy to do, like, very shortly.
Totally. This is such a totally shitty analogy, but I feel like what we're doing is we're trying to build like airplanes, and like what the consumers want is really just to get to A to B, and our only capacity right now is to build a plane that hovers like 5 feet off the ground.
Right.
And we're like, see, it gets you to A to B.
You
like,
get to A to B, but you got to hover first, right?
But like, you're not going to have any potholes, and the ride's going to be smooth. But
well,
then
you know what?
You fundraise on the process that you're going to be Concorde.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
The reason that I focused on AR in my career is because I was at the very beginning of real-time 3D at Atari back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I saw how shitty it was. And I saw the evolution of real-time 3D go from everyone hated it because it was blocky and chunky and dumb. And then Virtua Fighter came out. the artists, you know, placed every vertex perfectly, and like it was a gorgeous game with 300 polygons per character, and the reason that I was so focused on AR in my career was I saw the same thing happening. The people were like, "Oh God, this is crappy. It's like it's awful. It's jumping all over the place, and you have these like super low polygon things, and you know who wants that?" But I could see that the technology would take it further, and then suddenly we'd have, you know, I mean, you look at 3D games now, you can almost not tell the difference between reality and the game.
This wouldn't be an episode
like
of
The Last of Us,
XR Talk,
or, you know,
without me talking about Fortnite at least once. Well, like I realized last week, like if 12-year-old Paul could see Fortnite looks like a Saturday morning cartoon that like you fully are playing in, there's no part about it. And I mean, this is such an accessible low common denominator, quote unquote, game, but like there's not any part of it. Like I remember seeing like Dragon's Lair, where they literally took cell shaded frame-based cartoons and tried to make it into a video game. You're like, oh yeah, at a glance that looks like a cartoon, but when you play it, you realize, oh, it's limited. You can only do this or that. It's almost like a choose your own adventure thing.
It's just XY,
but we have gotten to that point where like, but the interesting problem is that like, I don't know how many 40 plus year old dudes or people are playing Fortnite that remembers like, man, I wish I could play a cartoon. Because like kids are growing up with Fortnite and they're like, this just looks like Fortnite, and cartoons look like, you know, movies. Like, but I did want to get back to the idea around expectation and technical challenge, because there was a question in the chat from our friend Todd Little at Fair Worlds. He's a very experienced developer, so I don't know if he meant to do this as a gotcha question or not, but he was like, do you think you'd ever be able to support curved surfaces with primer? You know, so like basically non-flat walls as a possibility.
That is a good question. I'm trying to figure out what kind of home decor thing is a curved surface.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, it is fair to say that like it's pretty reliable that walls are flat generally, and that a house with curved walls is not common. So maybe it's a bigger question of like, are you thinking about doing this type of pre-visualization of materials on physical objects other than walls, like other things?
Yeah. So right now we're pretty much only focused going to be on flat surfaces. So we're going to do flooring and, you know, other things that are along that.
Again, we've woven this tapestry of startup talk in XR throughout this whole time. Maintaining relentless focus despite questions like that is like extremely important in these early, like, as you.
Oh yeah. Paul, you've been through fundraising.
You don't want to tell anyone no. You don't want to tell anyone no, but.
Yes, of course. Yes.
It's design-minded approach. It's like why? I'm curious. Why curved surfaces versus the engineering thing where you start nerding out about vertex shaders?
Response to the question, because like no, there are not a lot.
Yeah, I immediately inventoried every wall I have access to. They're all flat.
Well, so I'll put on my entrepreneur hat, which is. We are currently hiring engineers, so if you are interested in the problem,
Todd, if you want to solve the curved wall problem,
that are not just flat, please do send me a DM. Or an email. I would love to chat about that.
So, damn it, Todd, your system doesn't work on this.
Yeah, you could be the one. Yeah, let me flip that. Let's flip that question on Todd. How come your system doesn't yet work on curved surfaces? Yeah, no, I mean, but it also does go back to the earlier conversation of like, if you tell a consumer, we can repattern your wall with different materials and finishes, when you say that from a completely non-technical, simply in the solution space, they're probably going to assume you can't just do it on any curved wall, right? Like a wall. They don't think about a wall as flat and that it's hard to do non-flat with this technology. They're just like, oh, if I happen to have the oval office or a curved room, I could just redecorate. But like, I guess, from a business perspective, that's probably a rare edge case that like, especially for an early stage, you're not motivated to solve that problem.
Yeah, and once again, I think it comes down a little bit to like strategy, right? Where as I keep bringing this up, but you went through fundraising, like you learn to really quickly read the room, like if someone actually stoked on your idea or if someone's just being nice. So I think a lot of the brands that we speak with, we can kind of gauge within the first 5 or 10 minutes of the call, like, hey, is this someone who is going to ask those questions and then trust that we're going to get there and then be really excited about it,
right?
Or it's someone who's kind of like, it doesn't really click with them.
They're looking for the reason to say no.
Yeah, or they just don't really get it, right? They're seeing these things as more of potential like downsides than they are like opportunities.
Right.
And then you're like, great, let's re-engage in like 2 to 5 years when like this stuff is way, way better. But having that kind of relentless focus, right? It's like just super important for anything that you're building, because AR right now is so open, VR is so open that you can kind of just build anything. And you need to be like, I used this word before, but like extremely surgical about solving one thing.
Yeah.
And then making sure the user experience about solving that one thing is really, really good. Because if you try to solve 10 things, or you try to reinvent how something works, it requires an insane amount of time and capital and patience and team size. And that's an awesome bet to make, but it's just, you have to know that that's like a massive, your company just.
Well, it also requires a ton of training for the users.
Your investors and board members should also know that that's what is the effort you're signing up for. Like, But Todd replied in the chat, like in Todd's defense, if they're working on a swimming pool design app, so I'd imagine the kidney bean shaped pool where you're mapping different materials onto the compound curved surfaces is probably a bit of a tough one. Yeah, I think actually Matt from 6D, he gave me this advice, which was from the startup side, which is like, what's the smallest market you can dominate? What is the largest market? What is the smallest market you can own? So it's like another way of saying, like, focus on like not solving, like, don't go for the biggest market as a small company. Like that's kind of your like, again, we're talking a lot about like startup stuff today, but like this idea of crossing the chasm, but first setting up a beachhead, and like the beachhead is that what is the smallest market that you can be dominant within,
right?
And that's focus.
I'm not really sure I agree with that.
Oh, that's fine.
When I left Mapbox, I had a coffee with our a coworker, and he was saying, I was asking him for advice, like, hey, I'm gonna go start a company, and he's been around the block. He like helped IPO Twilio and stuff. Like he's just, I trust the dude a lot with a lot of the product strategy stuff. And he's saying, like, well, the most important thing obviously is people. Everyone will tell you that, but he's saying the thing that it's very, very hard for you to get a good pulse on is like your entire team is going to be like pushing a boulder, and it's going to require an immense amount of effort, and what everyone's signing up for. But you're either going to be pushing the boulder up a hill or down a hill. And your market and like just the dynamics of the environment is going to determine your slope angle.
The grade of the hill.
Totally. So if you're in a market where there's not a whole lot of technology, but there's a lot of excitement about the stuff that you're building, and
that's a downhill.
That's a downhill. If you're building an extremely saturated market, like I'm trying to build like a SaaS chat app for Teams, then I'm going to be pushing it up the hill. We can have the best execution in the world, but the switching cost from an existing solution is going to be huge. Right. So part of the reason we got excited about home decor was like there's an insane amount of potential energy with Pinterest, HCTV, Instagram, all this stuff, but nobody's converting those things to purchase as well. And our hypothesis to investors were like, we think this entire industry will go the way of Snapchat. We think shopping will be a camera first experience. And we want to be like the next platform for any kind of home decor brands to like list their shit. And AR was like a footnote.
Yeah.
AR was like, that's just like the camera first experience.
Yep.
Because in the dynamic we were fundraising in, AR kind of failed. At least at the time do you know what I mean? Like the public discourse of AR was kind of like, there was no killer app and all this stuff. But when you framed it as a camera first experience, in a market where we were pushing a boulder down a hill, I think those two things helped us.
So your objection to that statement of like, what's the smallest market you can own is the problem with that is that the reason why the market is small is because the uphill grade is extreme. Like basically you can have a small market that's starting, or you can have or you can have a small market that is not going to ever turn downhill. You'll be forever going uphill, right? Like so it.
Totally, I think it's a little bit of a tangential point, but it always worries me a little bit when you see like really small market sizes, because you're making two bets at that point. Like you're making the bet that the team you're funding is not going to implode, that is going to build the rights, is going to find product market fit. Those two things already have a very slim chance of happening. And you're assuming the market will already grow.
Yep.
And those are three huge bets. So it makes sense to de-risk and only have two big bets, which is, hey, we know this market's already huge. We just kind of hope the team doesn't implode, and we kind of hope they find product market fit. And that's an easier place to build anything in, because you can kind of go into any traditional partnership meeting and say, hey, we know this is a huge cost center for you. Hey, we know you're capturing a lot of purchases for you. We know this is a massive revenue stream for you. We're just taking kind of a new approach about how we're going to bring you more money or save you money. And that's already like, you already have a huge amount of revenue you can capture, which then creates recurring revenue for you to build a business. It's way harder when you have a really, really small market and you say to investors, we think this will be $1 trillion market in 10 years, because it might not arrive. And as startups, you need to validate yourself every year and a half or 2 years to keep raising money. If you're not showing the growth, you could be doing the best fucking thing. You could be like Elon Musk level of operator, like you could be the best entrepreneur in the world or the best team in the world. But if your market size is like $100 million, like you can't play the VC game, because you capture 100% of it. You are a rounding error.
Which just like infuriates me, because $100 million is a lot of fucking money. The
system is fundamentally broken in many ways. That's one of the ways.
Speaking of, go ahead.
Real quick, I wanted to yank us out of VC business, whatever you guys.
Should have worn my Patagonia vest.
I'm wearing a startup hoodie, if that counts.
I wanted to pull this back into the tech that you guys are using, and one of the things that I did when Shawneen and I were choosing what color black for the house, right? So we showed that we painted our house black, and one of the things that we did was I went to Sherwin-Williams and I got like 4 cans of testers. And I painted them on the side of that right there, on that wall. And I took pictures throughout the day of how that would look with the sunlight on it, the sunlight off it, like bounce light, and so she was able to see, because she was working, this is pre-COVID, before we were all like working out of our houses. She was working at her place at Melitas Beverage in Portland, and she was able to see the color like all four swatches, and I sent her, I think, 4 pictures, like, morning, late morning, late afternoon, late afternoon. And so she was able to see the color of the house throughout the day, and she chose it from those 4 pictures.
Oh,
So
awesome.
my question to you is, are you looking at environmental lighting when you guys are shading that stuff? I know that you have some reflections in there, and you're apparently not using actual like world reflections, because you're not asking me to move my camera around and take a
Yep.
360. But like is there a plan to have that kind of, because lighting changes and color changes, and so that red wall may be really nice and diffuse and muted in the afternoon when the southern light isn't shining through that window. But once the southern light shines through, it's like cartoon world and everything's bright red. So like, have you thought about like this is obviously a next step for your project, but like have you guys thought about that kind of like modifying lighting and color material interactions with lighting?
Yeah, yeah. We've thought about this quite a bit.
Okay, good.
I don't know if you can, Paul, you can pull
Sure.
up tweets or
Yeah.
something, but we have a video of that working on Twitter. It's not on the app yet, but
Nice. Oh
it'll
my
be
God.
there in a
Like and
couple.
subscribe. I totally hit that one.
Yeah, like and
It's
subscribe.
Primer Supply on Twitter.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think I retweeted it myself. I retweeted
totally
myself. It's
I
such a
also
weird
said
thing to
that
say.
before. I'm not pimping your ride. I wanted to know that question. And you actually have done the
Oh yeah.
research and have the yeah.
So
So
it's
fucking A.
the so it's the first. I think if you go all the way up,
Oh, let me go to.
I
I
think
was
it's the
trying to go to
first.
media. Oh, my
Yeah, so
friend
it's the one
Kyle
Kyle
retweeted
retweeted.
it.
So
Nice.
oh, you
Oh
know
yeah, he's
Kyle.
great.
Kyle's great. So yeah, so it's that, and we have the same working for paint, so that's just tile, but we're essentially taking the lighting that's on the back wall,
And people
and then
occlusion. Wait, phone occlusion.
phonically, yeah, it's the depth API gives you
Oh,
that.
nice. Okay, so it's not
Yeah.
just the human
Um,
segmentation stuff.
yeah. So you can kind of see like the flashlight from the phone is influencing the lighting on the surface.
Just so people
And we do
know
this.
that are sorry to interrupt, but like just so people know that are watching this, the semicircle tile pattern is completely virtual. This is because it's kind of hard to tell at a glance
Yeah.
that this is being superimposed on a probably a plain colored wall,
Yeah.
but the hand and phone is real and light.
Yeah. So essentially what we're doing there is we have like a metal shader that essentially figures out the wall's kind of base color and then figures out what highlights and shadows are on it. And then we apply that on top of the virtual material. Now that works really, really well when you have basic walls, like as you're seeing in my bathroom. It doesn't work really well when you are projecting this virtual surface on top of brick, wood, tile sets, that kind of stuff. So we're trying to essentially figure out how to like properly extract shadow maps from surfaces that are not just flat. And then we're going to be kind of shipping that as a beta in a couple months. Probably.
Modifying, are you using I mean, are you using, degrees Kelvin for your lighting solution and stuff like that? I mean, are you getting that techie, or
Yeah, so it's a mixture. We just to get super technical, it's a scene kit technique that has multiple passes, and one pass is getting the actual light estimation ARKit gives you. So that gives you an okay Kelvin. It gives you an okay light estimation. But then we have a scene kit technique pass that's our own metal shader that then actually does the proper kind of relighting of that
So
material.
okay, so just to like push this even a little bit further, if someone had like a velvet, kind of if there was some dimension to the wallpaper, would you be able to properly simulate that as well?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we haven't talked about that I think is really, really cool with Primer and something that we've invested a lot in that the users will never see. It's like, it's like we talk about this quite a
That's
bit.
what
Where
this
it's
show
like,
is for. It's the obscure niche stuff that only nerds care
so,
about.
So when we did our initial research in home decor, everyone had like the same fucking question. They're like, "Why don't you just like do furniture, man? Like, isn't there like IKEA? Can
Oh
you
my
just
god, I can't
isn't like
imagine how many
Shopify
times you
doing
hear
stuff?"
IKEA place as a.
And then it totally, and you have to be like, you have to play that thing of like that's the first time you heard the question. You're like, oh wow, no, I haven't used any of the other. But what I got really really excited about is the reason that stuff just doesn't fucking scale is modeling furniture is so hard and making it presentable in AR is so hard. Like, yeah, you might have the CAD
Yep.
models, you might have photography of it, but like converting that into like looking good in AR is super, super hard.
And moving fast. Right.
Totally. But the reason we started with vertically mounted things like paint, tile, wallpaper, is for wallpaper, we essentially get the repeating pattern for free, and then we put on our own stuff to make it look better. Paint, it's just a paint color. It's an RGB value that we superimpose in the scene. But with tile, we have a really, really cool system that our one of our employees, Brennan, who's great, set up for us is we take photography from the tile manufacturers, like a DSLR photography, and then we delight it and we kind of auto tile it, and then we generate grout lines for it. And then from that image, we then generate the different PBR textures, and then we kind of massage those a little bit. And then we bring those directly into AR. So in order for us to spin up a new tile manufacturer, it's like days of work and not months of work.
Right. Yeah.
Which is super important on the business side because our cost of onboarding a brand partner is really, really low compared to like a traditional.
You modularized it. That's fucking great.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And the fact that like our stuff looks good and you don't know we're doing that is like the best compliment.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I have a suggestion, and maybe I'm insane and this is stupid, but we had talked about this at Magic Leap, where as you look around the room, you capture images of the room and then build an equirectangular sky dome of the room around you. And as you continually build that sky dome, then that becomes the reflection vector for all of your materials. And I'm wondering, like, if you wanted to do a really, like, you could say, yeah, sure, just like throw this up there and stuff, okay, and then have a second step where you're like, oh, let's look at what this really looks like right now, and then you do a spin. And capture your sky dome, and then project that lighting onto the reflection, onto
ARKit does that already.
Yeah,
it does it by itself.
Yeah, but there's a really interesting thread there, which is like it essentially generates a cube map and then it projects it on the surface, so you get the reflections for free. So you don't need to do any of like the sky dome that you're talking about.
Because I didn't feel that when I was looking at it this
morning. We are with glossy surfaces. So if you go into like a glossy tile set, it should actually reflect the floor and your kitchen appliances and that kind of stuff.
What's around me? Okay, all right. We'll look at it again.
But yeah, an interesting thing on that is like, I think when you're building an AR app or a company, it's really difficult to innovate on foundational things, because if they're like the obvious next step that everyone's going to take value in it, it'll just be commodified. Because like ARKit will just digest it and make it part of the platform and give it to you for free. So like when we think about, it's like what's on the screen right now. Oh,
rip.
But that's kind of what you see on the screen. Like if you think about the kind of color accuracy with paint and doing shadows and that kind of stuff, we think that's like so bespoke to home decor that ARKit and ARCore might not commodify that anytime soon. So that's kind of how we're trying to place those bets, is like occlusion, better tracking. Okay, let's trust that the platforms will take care of that. And I think they are with LiDAR and other stuff. But for like really specific things to home decor, we're pretty comfortable doing a lot of tech leg lift for that.
Really interesting. You guys, and you've mentioned this several times during this talk, that you are focusing on things that are good for the business, that might not be something, like you were saying, that would be commoditized, right? Like you're like very clever, and I like and subscribe.
Adam, you're smart. Has anyone ever told you you're?
Yeah.
Like and subscribe.
Well, so like, but actually, yeah, this ties into what I was going to ask earlier, which is, again, from a business kind of perspective. Well, actually, first question I definitely want to ask is, how hard was it to get primer.com?
I've got a funny story about that.
Because I was very impressed that was the URL.
What's that old joke where it's the friends, the family friends, or the close friends you want to have in your life is a lawyer, a doctor, and a car mechanic.
Right.
And I feel like in the internet age, we should add domain name guy. Yeah, it's one of my best friends out here in Marin pretty much does domains for a living. Yeah. So
I've always been.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, Paul. Anytime you need domains,
I grew up. One of my hometowns is Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and myrtlebeach.com was this huge it was back in the old what was the only registrar you could use back in the day? Enom, maybe? You can only register domain names through Enom or whatever. And somebody got myrtlebeach.com for like under $50. And it basically multiple businesses, $1 million businesses have been built off this one domain name. And then and I was working at a newspaper where we were in their Web 1.0 days, where it was just like domain name speculators. It was like, if you think people making millions of dollars off real estate is kind of like a well-worn path, the fascinating thing about people that just picked up 4-letter domain.com domains, just whatever, back in the day, they just they were easy and very cheap to register, and then they basically retired. Their children's have retired off of domain name speculation. So I'm interested in the topic, but yeah, it is real estate. It's a real estate business.
Yeah, and we're I feel like I can talk about this for forever, so I'll keep it super, super short. A lot of how people kind of acquire domain names is people, as you just said, they've been sitting on it they registered it in 1997, 1998, and they're kind of either they don't know the value of this thing, but they don't trust the internet, and they don't want to have someone PayPal them $500. Or they're like, this is worth.
Yeah, they're over. Yeah. Their calibration is extreme on both ways. Either I forgot I registered this, or I think this is worth $10 million.
Totally.
I knew one of our IT guys at Atari back in 91, 92, 93, registered all of the letters of the alphabet.
Oh.
And
.com.
Just A.com, B.com, C.com.
I bet he doesn't work in IT anymore.
Definitely going to college. Wow. That's the best investment that person could have made.
Right? Yeah, it cost him $2 a piece, whatever.
Yeah. So with primer.com, we essentially had to track down this guy who was using it for his, I think, small business. And we had to essentially pay him through very old school ways just to make sure he felt very safe about it. But those right after we raised.
Cash in a manila envelope, or
Well, so it's funny because that friend that I have once bought a domain from this guy who was in the suburbs of Detroit, and he didn't trust the government and didn't really trust traditional ways to get paid. So my bud flew to Detroit, rented a car, and gave him a suitcase of cash, essentially.
Nice.
Go, and then pulled out his laptop, and then they transferred the domain over.
That's awesome.
So We didn't have to do that.
Oh, nice.
That was just,
That's a story right there. That's kind of a cool little like, yeah, this little chunk. You could build something around that. Yeah.
But I think it's super. I mean, I think having a really good domain name is really, really important because it's a little bit like politics where it's all about optics.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you are a small business and you are talking to Apple, you're talking to big companies that want to partner with you. No one knows how much is in your bank account, and no one knows your team size. What they can see is how good your website is, how good your branding is, and how good your domain is, and how well you talk. But like those three things are the leading indicators, and they vastly change the calculus in how people size you up.
Right.
So if you're emailing them from
primersupply@gmail.com.
Totally. At that point, just email them from your Gmail and do that power move. You know.
Well, I just registered my primer.xxx. So.
Well, we talked about. I think was it the last? Maybe it was the Torch episode. I was telling Spencer like, I almost have this curse of like if I have any. If like we were talking about earlier, if you have any glimmer of an entrepreneurial opportunity, I'm immediately looking up domain names and branding, and I'm thinking like before it's even a thing, I'm already thinking about could it be a legitimate thing, and I've actually killed ideas based off like I couldn't find a good domain name that matched with it, like I come up with a name and I like for Torch like. Oh man, we did torch3d.com.
Well, what was it? It was
Vertex Labs. Too long, but that was like a quick one just to get a shingle.
Dude, I loved that. I thought
you're not
cool.
you're not an investor or a consumer, but but then like Torch, I had a really good story behind like why Torch, and it took me a few days to arrive at that. And then the closest thing I could get domain name wise was torch3d.com. And at the time, Unity had unity3d.com. It kind of matched up. It kind of made sense. But man, when Google released the .app domain and we got torch.app, I was all over it. Like it was like perfect.
I mean, essentially what it is, it's an insurance policy as well. So we got the domain, we did all the stuff. We even have primer.app, which then redirects to the App Store page. So it's easy to be like, go to primer.app to download. And we had another startup launch that was called Primer, and they got with primer.com instead of primer.com. And I think just in this world where startup names, because of the App Store, are all kind of like single word names, like Paper, Torch, Primer, Stripe, Slack. They're all. It's very different from Web 2.0 days. Now, when a consumer hears about that or brand hears about that, they kind of automatically assume you have the .com. Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of a blessing and a curse to have a simple name.
Oh, I'll just look you up at primer.com. We'll be there.
Yeah. Totally.
I have evilcorporatebank.com.
Evilcorporatebank.com.
Well, I was thinking, like you mentioned, the old Web 2.0 joke was it was color plus noun.com, right? So it was like, purple zebra,
run.
Or it was like it was always a combination. I'm always the branding thing is a whole, but the other thing I wanted to ask about was like you very clear up in front, almost literally center of your website is platform. And so like we talked a little bit about how you hope that the AR kit and AR core, like the OSs or the foundational technologies, provide a lot of this like difficult tech, but you're also willing and capable of building on top of that where it makes sense for the problem space you're in. But platform to me implies that your primary motivation and model doesn't revolve around people downloading the Primer app in the long term per se, right? Like are you looking to enable, like is a part of your roadmap or a part of your like something you can talk about is like, actually, like if sorry to use a cliche that I'm sure you hear a lot, but like if Sherwin-Williams wants to embed this capability in their mobile app, this is something we can help them with. Is that a part of?
Yeah. So there was a really, I don't know, I'm sure you read, I can never pronounce it right, like Strategery. Did you read that blog?
Yeah, I also don't know how to pronounce it, but yes.
Yeah, but there's a great
just
article
like your
there.
last name, Adam.
I should get my lastname.com.
Nice. Was it from the same guy?
I'll bring a suitcase full of cash. But there was an interesting quote where Bill Gates was investing in Facebook for some reason a while ago, and Facebook at that time was kind of touting themselves as like the platform for mobile games. This is like Zynga time, and Bill Gates' quote was like, "That's a crock of shit. Like a platform is when the people on your platform are vastly have more kind of net worth and more."
Yeah, you don't declare yourself a platform. You are anointed a platform, right?
Exactly. So that word choice for us is quite deliberate. We really want to be like the best place for you to like, I won't give you the whole spiel, but we want to be the best place for you to like visualize stuff in your home, and it makes sense to like bring products into that platform. But I think what's really fascinating from like a strategy perspective is building this technology, both the virtualization pipeline of millions of models, and then the user experience and the tech problem set of like making this stuff really easy to like look good in your space is a really hard challenge that these brands can't really do. Like they can maybe spend a lot of money to hire a team or build an agency, but like they're not going to. So we're kind of like the only people right now who are doing this stuff, which is fascinating because then you can kind of have that tactical perspective of like, if you want the superpower that you're really excited about, you have to be in our app because we don't have the resources to like white label stuff for you. We just don't have the team.
Right.
And if you do want to have access to this, like you kind of have to be part of Primer. Now, of course, we want to explore stuff with them where, we can do special
and you'll have to
brands.
use this color palette.
Yeah, but the interesting tactical perspective there, right, is like if you build up a marketplace early because you have unique technology and these brands kind of have to be part of your journey, then that marketplace becomes really valuable because you have the supply.
Yep.
You also have the consumers, so then you can go back to brands and say, hey, not only do you have the superpower, we now are giving you customers that would have never found your brand.
Right.
So now there's value to be on the marketplace. The really fucking hard thing to do with building marketplaces is you essentially need some sort of fire, like starter log, to ignite both the supply and the consumer side, which is why new marketplaces don't exist.
Right.
Like it's very, very rare for a startup to really build a marketplace successfully, unless they're in like a really, really small niche.
Yeah.
And we actually think that through kind of AR and through this technology, we have actually found like a once in a 5-year time span, like wedge. It's like, okay, we have this like lead start advantage. We can actually build a marketplace around this. Did that answer your question? I feel like I kind of rambled.
Yeah, no. I think it's a good, again, we could probably do a whole other episode around just startups and this idea. Like, but I've run into this frequently, like this idea of a marketplace. And like, again, it kind of ties back to the product conversation of consumers just want their problem solved. And so like, there's a couple different ways you could, like, from what I'm hearing from you is like, you're basically saying eventually consumers will expect to be able to, they will not buy a interior finish without seeing it in their home first. Like they eventually, or very soon, the market will be, that is just an assumption. That is just or at a very minimum, there's really impressive metrics around people that pre-visualize a finish or a material in their home will buy it. And so what you're banking on is that like, if your brand and product as a material and finish company isn't represented in this space, you almost don't exist to a huge portion of consumers.
Yeah. Right.
But like there's other people that it's the same infrastructure, it's the same product, it's the same everything, but they simply frame it differently, which is like, oh, we're going to have thousands and thousands of material and finish people in our space, and that will bring consumers to us. And I always feel like that's a bad play, because like, again, consumers, and I include myself as we are ruthless in that we don't care. I just want to find, like, I'm not going to like pre-visualize a finish in my home and be like, oh, well, I'm going to go use this service because they have thousands and thousands of partners. I want to find something that's cool. Yeah, exactly. So,
right.
Yeah. So well, like, it's that flywheel.
I immediately saw the value of this app when I showed Shawneen what the entrance way would look like with tile. Like it was just like, it was instant. Both of us could see it. I was like, I know, here, hold the phone.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, wow. And then she started like moving through the different stuff and going, like, she totally got
so
it.
Is it. And is it fair to say in that example, is it fair to say that like in the early parts of the marketplace, you say, well, the partners we do have a much higher percentage of making a sale because they're here. And then eventually, once we get like then the real value you bring as a platform or as primer is that curation aspect. Eventually there'll be tons of choices and tons of things. And so then you'll be like, from the consumer, from Spencer's point of view, you'd be like, well, we actually, as you swept around your room, we kind of noticed your color palette. And, could you tell us about the few brands that you already like? And then, like,
here's some choices.
Yeah, but that stuff only comes at scale, right? It only comes.
Yeah, that's right.
So is that the idea?
Yeah, and I think it's a two-step thing, where you touched on a note there, where anytime you build something that you expect it to be a consumer experience or a business, you have this kind of excitement about the industry or about what you want to build, because otherwise you wouldn't be doing it, right? You have this like, the world will look a little bit different if this thing was awesome and existed. And I think people get to like 95% of it, and then they kind of fumble the ball at the last 5%. And the last 5% is demonstrating the value to people who weren't immediately bought in on the vision. And I think that happens a lot, especially in the AR VR crowd, where people like us kind of get it and we see the potential. We can start being like, okay, cool, you guys are going to go there and you guys are going to do this and you guys are going to do that. And like, you start like brainstorming all this stuff, and it's really, really cool. But a lot of really, really smart people don't understand the implications of it. And those people could be brand partners, it could be VCs, it could be future employees, it could be a bunch of stuff. And it's kind of your responsibility to like objectively say, hey, if somebody visualizes a tile set in their space for more than 30 seconds, their likelihood of purchase goes up 40%.
Right.
Then you go to like clay tile and you go, well, objectively, here is the data.
Yeah.
It's right. And then it's like, that suddenly becomes kind of a no-brainer. But validating those assumptions is so important, and demonstrating that your assumptions were right are really, really important, because I think people just fall short of that, and they get. And I understand, because I've been there, right? When they're a little bit more junior in their career, they just get frustrated. They're like, "Why can't you see the potential?
I'm a good person and I build cool things. Why, that should be enough."
Right. You should just buy it. Right.
You should just know. Right?
I laugh, but I mean, I still have to check myself on this stuff, right?
This is advice to myself.
So I've got this iPad, right? And this is a 2020 iPad. It's got the LiDAR scanner on it. And I just like looked at this wall and immediately put something on there. Have you thought about the utility of having being able to, with my approval, send
I like how this is starting.
Send my mesh to a local Portland designer with my color choices and the and the current color of everything, and start that conversation between me and a local designer, because that is really who I'm going to hire to come in and do the design in my house. But I have this now utility where I'm like, you know what, shit, that red looks freaking great on that wall, and I like this over here, and you know what, holy crap, the flooring. I wasn't even thinking about doing the flooring, and now I'm thinking TNT on the floor, and and so like that seems like a really great kind of avenue to local suppliers, because I'm gonna need to see that person. I will. Maybe not everyone will, but I will need to see that person and talk to them about the ideas, and we'll both be in my house. We'll have our freaking COVID masks on and all that shit. But like that. Have you thought about that layer of it?
We have, especially on the professional side for interior designers, for brands, for contractors.
Right.
I think for us that comes super late in the process. For a couple product reasons and a couple business reasons, what you're essentially doing is you're creating lead generation for contractors, and the business model there is super hard.
Yep.
To do right, because then you end up being on the hook for every interaction you have with them. What happens if you decide on a tile that's not through primer? Do they have existing relationships with other tile manufacturers in the area? There's just like a sea of complexity that comes
right,
business around there.
You're like forcing them to use Sherwin-Williams, because that's how I got through it, was through a Sherwin-Williams app, and so now they have to use, and they never use Sherwin-Williams, and so it's like,
or you have the other mess, which is like, thank you for your consultation. I will now take this information, and as a savvy consumer, will go find cheaper, faster, better alternative. And I've completely disconnected from your connection.
So I think that for us comes after we reach a little bit more scale. Once that kind of lead generation of contractors, and when we have a team.
Right, when you guys become sexy enough, then you can.
I object. I think you're sexy now. But go ahead.
You are very sexy now. But if you become more sexy, if you become like unbelievably sexy, then at that point you can offer this as a perk to designers who will use.
I think about the Matterport, like the Matterport model, right? Like the early days of Matterport, where it was like the real estate agencies, had a relationship with them, and then they said, well, if you list with us, you can get a 3D scan of and we can show, again, it goes back to your original point, Adam, actually, metrics wise, we can show that if you have a 360 scan of your property available for people, like the offer rate is this much more above asking, this much less time than your average thing. That is
and I think our beat by beat play here is going to be, right now we kind of launched an MVP that's like kind of, it's okay at showing stuff in your space, but the next big push, which we have a build I think coming out next week or the week after, where we kind of redo the UI a little bit to let you browse the whole product menu in AR. So it's still like Swift UI, but the UI is a little bit more conducive to like being like, oh, actually, I want to do paint now. I want to do top. Like I just want to like bounce around without leaving the camera view. But then the next beat after that is making the experience actually a little bit more collaborative. So like having an artifact that you can share with your spouse or your partner or your friend and be like, hey, between these 3 wallpapers, which one should I do? Or hey, the next time you come home, you should be able to just see that in your space.
Are you talking about more than photo and video?
Yeah, pretty much. It should be like artifacts that link back into Primer, and then that way you can have a conversation.
Sounds like a little bit of persistence and some anchoring going on, possibly.
A little bit. The strategy, like maybe I'm talking a lot about strategy today, but I feel like it's really important.
It is.
Paul, you said you would not do the gotcha thing, and you're doing it right now.
I'm just a very savvy listener.
But the interesting strategy behind that, right, is like whenever you build a really cool app, it's like what's your distribution method and how are you getting people back into it?
Yeah.
Because so much of the AR experience is like, I'm sure you guys had this with Torch, is like somebody downloads it for 5 minutes and goes, cool, that was cool.
Yep.
And they like come back. So how do you build those kind of retention loops?
Acquisition and retention loops. Thank you, Andrew Chin.
Oh yeah, man, dude. I joked with our lead investor of our first round that I was going to buy him some khakis. As a cack. Like that's one of those words that haunts you.
So for people don't know that there's again, if you're interested in this product stuff, and this has been a great conversation. Like normally we don't get this deep in the startup and product space, but it is a passion of mine. But over the past couple of years, so Andrew Chin was like kind of, I don't know, I hesitate to say like growth hacker, but he was kind of a part of that world. And then he wound up at Andreessen Horowitz, and he's published some really interesting thoughts around product management and this idea of acquisition and retention and loops, and the idea of getting people into your app, and then how do you keep them or how do you bring them back to your app when we're fighting for attention and all these things. It's actually, and then the most recent thing was like Superhuman was kind of the Superhuman's this email product, and they published an article about how they asked like a 4-question survey to their customers to kind of drill down and make sure they were focused. And like, if you really follow this stuff, it's kind of funny because then you see companies subscribe. Like I, all of a sudden after the Superhuman article came out, like a few weeks later, I started getting 4-question surveys from a lot of different startups because they were trying to figure out there, but it's all good stuff. And like, this is all inside baseball, but I mean, it's just, unfortunately, I mean, I think if there was one takeaway, it's that in this world of startups and being product oriented, building a really great product is not enough. And you've got to think about all this stuff, and you can't be too attached to anything. You've got to listen to the customers and
and don't be a dick.
Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know.
That too. Yeah.
No,
I do think it's possible to have a great product and a successful company and not be a dick, but things are not always set up that way.
Yeah, but don't be a dick. I mean, just like,
I've actually learned that, like, I don't know, maybe you guys had the same experience. Like when your round is competitive, you have a lot more optionality, and the VCs or the investors that are like the people who are genuine and who are nice, you just end up wanting to work more with.
Oh yeah.
So it's like those assholes actually lose a lot of deal flow. It's a very
I mean, the worst part about it, I was, again, back to this conversation I just had yesterday, like the easiest money that we had available to us or that we took, I won't say which, but like the easiest checks were the worst people. And then the people that passed on us or like didn't invest have always responded to emails and have always been super nice. And I've always circled back to them, and they've always given like genuine feedback. They've never invested, but I've always wished they had. Yeah. And it's because they do that.
I would say the same about clients for us.
Yeah, it's true.
Like the clients that we've really, really enjoyed have pushed back hard on us and have been like not completely on board until we, like really figured out exactly what they wanted. I think that the easy money is there's
a reason. There's always a reason. There's
a reason why it's easy money, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I've got a funny story for you. I'll obfuscate the details so I don't expose who this person is. But we had a pitch meeting super early in the day back in the day with Primer, and we hop on this video chat with this person, and he's top of his lungs karaokeing Queen.
Like what?
Bohemian Rhapsody. Like seriously, Bohemian Rhapsody. And he's like,
Like, we are the
Galileo,
champions.
Galileo, let me go. La, 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 la. And I don't mean to incriminate Russ, but Russ and I were just like, what the
This sounds like an episode of Silicon Valley.
Dude, seriously, I was just about to say that. It was such a parody, you couldn't make it up.
Right.
And we were just like, is this real life? Like, we were so tired and we were so impatient.
Right.
But we both have to do the thing because our round wasn't done
Yeah.
yet. We both have to do it where we're like, oh, yeah, like, it's not weird. Like, sure, this is like quirky. And then he spent like 50 minutes of that call talking about our past and like how my co-founder was in a band and he was in a band and like all of this stuff. And we were just like, holy shit, this is like the weirdest thing. And this is like a really well-respected firm. Like, you look at the companies they list and it's like the heavy hitters. And we're just like, no. Like, we'd rather raise less.
Right. Yeah. Like, what's the board meeting going to be like with this person?
Totally. Like, I don't want my, when you write investor emails, like, and then your investors write back, like, great job, bud. Like, I don't want this guy to send back like a diatribe about.
Okay, so now I'm going to push back on this a little bit. It sounds like this guy was having a great time, and maybe he was an awesome.
Oh, so that's your California coming out, Spencer.
Right? Like, maybe he was just like freaking high out of his head and he was just like ripped.
Oh my god!
And maybe. Maybe he would be good.
Well, but it's really interesting what you brought up, Paul, which is a really good.
Not what I brought up.
But, yeah. No. But like it touches on what you just said, Spencer, which is a really good leading indicator of like how good someone is to work with. Is like how responsive are they to your emails, as you said. But Spencer, also, it's like, if it's your first time meeting someone, especially like someone you might want to like be part of their company,
and then
you spend the first 5 minutes, it's a really good culture test, right? If you're also that type of person and you reciprocate, then maybe you would love for that person
maybe
to be
it's a marriage. Yeah. Right.
For you, it was bizarre and a red flag.
Yeah.
For someone out there, they were like, "This is awesome."
It might have been a good.
I must have this person invest.
But I'm excited for that. I'm excited for that dude's blog post.
I'm excited for that Silicon Valley episode.
I could just say that Paul and I in that meeting, I'd be all over that guy, and it'd be amazing. And we'd end up and we'd do a post mortem on the meeting, and Paul would be like,
there's a listen, I have multiple reliable sources that a lot of the content on Silicon Valley comes from very true real stories.
Oh, absolutely.
Very actual material. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Well,
I believe that.
I'm on time check it. We're longer than a Marvel movie feature length film at this point.
Oh,
We're 2.5 hours in.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
But it's been look, it's if you think about the fact that we dove deep on Adam's career, we briefly touched on Primer, and then we wove in a lot of deep dives on what it is to do startups, in particular AR startups, and try to deal with consumer products and products in general in the AR space. I don't think we spent enough time on it, but
we hammered.
We covered a lot of ground, that is all thanks to you, Adam, for like being willing to flip from topic to topic with us.
No, of course. Thanks so much for having me on. This has been super fun, and always love chatting about this stuff.
Yeah, you've been great, and it makes me wonder if we should talk, like maybe even do some more talks around. Oh, sorry. Eric, thank you, Eric. And Eric has been such a long time member of the community. He gets priority on his questions. He did ask this back in the beginning of the show where we're talking about your childhood. He'd like to know what your first computer was and what your early computer experience. What got you into it?
Yeah, totally. I really love. I think my first experience was doing Windows. It was a 3.1. It was the first consumer.
The first real one. First real Windows.
Yeah, and that was just my dad's computer. He was a total nerd when it came to that stuff, and he would print the terminal commands or command prompt commands next to like where our computer was, and like as soon as I kind of learned how to read, I would type in those commands on how to play like video games and stuff like that. So I don't remember the specific model, but it was probably like a mid, I don't know, trying to think, when I was 6, that would have been 95.
So yeah, well, no, it would have been
96ish.
Yeah, because Windows 3.1, because I mean, obviously Windows 95 came out, and that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So you were probably like on a, I don't know. There were so many little different PCs back then, but basically back then it was were you Amiga, Commodore, or PC? And you were in the PC camp, I think.
It was PC, for sure. Yeah.
And maybe some Atari, maybe an Atari computer, and maybe an Apple II was kind of this.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. That seems really old.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You know,
Spencer's
my first computer was
Spencer's first computer was an iMac.
Right. So the craziest thing is, and like we joke about this a little bit at Primer. It's like I got the iPhone, the OG iPhone, when I was a freshman in high school.
Man.
Okay, so
all right.
I grew up with the touch thing.
Come on, I got to represent it here. My first computer was a 64-bit computer in the Navy that was magnetic core memory.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was called a Yuck 20.
Yuck.
Yeah,
the Yuck.
UYK 20. You could actually drop it from about 300 feet onto the steel deck of the battleship, and it wouldn't break.
They would use it as a sacrificial anode once it was done, right? And just
right, exactly. Yeah, then you just weld it onto the bottom of the boat
to collect rust.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, chat. I don't know. We got a lot of good feedback already. This is a long, deep, intense one, but I really enjoyed it, and we're definitely going to tell people to check it out. Adam, thanks so much. Primer is awesome. Primer will be it's definitely on the very short list, if not the top of, like, if somebody says, show me a good AR app, it's beautiful. Well done.
Well, thank you so much.
Clearly your passion for design and product,
especially on the iPad 2020, and like it's really like, yes, you can use it on the iPhone, but on the iPad 2020, it's amazing that you can just like touch the wall, and it's there. You know, like, awesome. You guys did a great representation of the spatial collection stuff. Yeah, really great.
Yeah, really appreciate that. I'm going to plug one thing.
Yeah, really please go ahead.
We are hiring.
Yeah.
So if you want to work on this stuff, we are hiring engineers. So any folks that who are interested in building cool AR stuff with us, who have experience with SceneKit, Metal, or come from like a 3D game background, we'd just love to talk.
Adam, you may not have Paul.
We do have so in our Discord, we didn't plug this. We do have if you go to chat.xrtalk.net, we have a Discord, and we do have a job opening. Like somebody, like we'll share that there as well. But like if you guys like all this stuff, and we have talked about all these types of things in the Discord between episodes, but people are always looking for opportunities, and I so far, based on what I'm hearing from the leadership and seeing the product, this seems like a great company to work for. If anyone's listening that would be qualified, so we'll share it. To anyone that's listened this long, oh my gosh, like thank you so much.
Thanks.
Like this is an investment of your time, and we appreciate that. We will. We don't have a guest lined up for next week just yet. Maybe we'll deep dive on a project, or we'll get some people scheduled. But as always, thank you so much. xrtalk.net. We're probably going to move to Twitch real soon. I was hoping to have some time to work on it this week, but I think that's coming. So just heads up. But we'll have watch.xrtalk.net point you to everything that we're available on. Adam, thanks again for the third or fourth time.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. That was really cool.
Yeah, super, super fun. And thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
yeah, we'll see everyone.